Good evening, everyone. We're back in public session. Tonight's meeting did start at 7. We immediately went into private session, and we are now back in public session. I would ask Mr. Slater if you would lead us in a flag salute. Sure.
Have a little help tonight. You guys ready?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Sure. You want to?
And I would just like to thank our Cub Scouts for coming this evening. We appreciate their visit, and we know that they're learning quite a bit about our local government in different ways in their dens. We appreciate you coming tonight. Thank you.
All right, announcements. Peggy, anything on your end?
From the Fine Arts Department. The Westfield Public Schools are celebrating the nationally acclaimed...
Can't hear you. Hang on, we'll get it right.
I have an announcement from Fine Arts. Is that any better?
Is that mic on?
Fine Arts?
Lucy, try your mic.
I have an announcement for Fine Arts. The Westfield Public Schools are celebrating the nationally acclaimed Youth Art Month with colorful and creative displays throughout the downtown area. Paintings, drawings, sculpture, and painted furniture designed by approximately 300 students from Westfield's 10 public schools are displayed by 37 downtown merchants, as well as the Westfield Memorial Library and RMC Studios in Garwood, who volunteer their window and display space for the month of March. Please enjoy this sampling of our students' work. It's just amazing when you go out and see all the work that they do and how good it is.
Thank you. Lucy, nothing? Brendan? Nothing. Mark?
This message is from the elementary schools. Tuesday, April 14th is the deadline for nominations for the annual Charles Philhauer Fellowship Award, designated for a full-time elementary teacher in the Westfield Public Schools. Letters of nomination are invited from interested citizens, parents, students, and Westfield Public School staff members and should be addressed to Charles Philhauer Fellowship Committee of the Westfield Rotary Club, care of the Office of the Superintendent of Schools, 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, 07090, or emailed to rotaryphilhauer@westfieldnjk12.org. Nominations should specify ways in which the teacher has demonstrated outstanding teaching, interest in children, and continued pursuit of professional growth. The teacher must be a full-time faculty member in grades K to 5 in the Westfield Public Schools for a minimum of 5 years. The fellowship recipient will be honored at a Rotary luncheon and at a Westfield Board of Education meeting, both scheduled for May 5th, and will receive a Rotary grant to further professional growth or to enhance classroom activities for students. The award was instituted in 1993 by the Westfield Rotary Club to recognize the importance of teaching in the elementary grades and to honor former Westfield Rotarian and school superintendent Charles Philhauer. We are grateful to the Westfield Rotary for continuing this tradition.
Thank you. Mitch, anything?
Yes. Westfield High School will be presenting Urinetown the Musical as their spring musical production on March 12th, 13th, and 14th, this upcoming weekend at 7:30. One of the funniest musicals in recent years, it's a hilarious tale of greed, corruption, love, and revolution in a time when water is worth its weight in gold. Tickets are available by visiting the high school theater department website, which will be on the screen probably, so you'll see that. The RIS Roosevelt Spring Musical is coming up. They're presenting Shrek the Musical on March 20th and 21st at 7:30 and March 22nd at 2 p.m. Shrek the Musical is more than a feel-good children's story. It digs deep into our inner self to find the meaning of true beauty. Tickets are $7 in advance, $10 at the door, and you can go to Roosevelt's website for that. And the spring musical at Edison happened, I believe, last weekend. Disney Channel's smash hit movie musical, High School Musical, was performed, and we congratulate the cast and the crew for a great production, which was performed last week.
Thank you. Ginny? Elaine? Richard?
I do. I have an announcement about our next Board of Education meeting. A regularly scheduled Board of Ed meeting will be held next Tuesday on March 17th. The agenda will include a budget presentation, and we anticipate approving the tentative budget for 2015-16 at that time. That's all.
Thank you. Dr. Nolan?
No.
All right. At this time, we're going to move into a public hearing on refunding a bond ordinance. And what I'd like to do there is, Dana, if you could just give us a 30-second overview. I know you went through this at the last meeting in detail. And we would then recognize the public for questions on the refunding item only, and then the board will look to the motions on that agenda item.
Right, so the board in 2007 issued bonds in the amount of $9.3 million to be paid back over a 20-year period. This is the first year that we are allowed by law to refinance those bonds. And our advisors, our financial advisors have recommended that we do so, and it would save us about $200,000. We will still pay them back by 2027, but including the cost of issuance, we still should save $200,000 by refinancing now at a lower interest rate. At the last board meeting, we had the first reading. We are required to have 2 readings and a public hearing. We advertised in the Westfield Leader on February 19th of the public hearing, and that's what we're doing this evening.
Does the board have any questions or comments on that before I move to the resolutions? Does the public have any questions or comments on the bond refinancing? All right, I'd ask the board to consider finance motions 1 through 3 with respect to the bond financing.
Second.
Ginny, thank you. Any questions or comments? No discussion? Roll call?
Rich Masezek?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
All right. I would now recognize the public for agenda items only. I would ask the following. To the extent there are comments on the lights, while you are welcome to comment now, it may make sense for you to wait for the Facilities Committee report, where we'll just recap what has happened to date. That's right after personnel. It's not too far into the agenda. If you have comments on the budget is actually a workshop tonight, so if you do have comments, while you're welcome to wait for the workshop, you may want to make those comments now. If you have comments on any other agenda item, you're welcome to make those now. If you have comments on non-agenda items, they will come at the end of the meeting. So with that, I would remind everybody that if you do have comments, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and address the board, not the audience. The microphone will not be a race to the microphone. There's plenty of time for people to speak. Sure.
Hello? That's a little frightening. How do I get it to not do that? Stand further away?
I don't know. Try
Okay.
that.
Maybe that's why, it's interference. Okay, my name is Susanna McLean.
Could you
I'm a,
speak to us, please, Susanna?
Comments at this time? Questions from the public? Absolutely. Yeah, if you have comments on the lighting or questions that you're welcome to speak now. I think it would make more sense for you to wait, but you're entitled to speak now. I will not cut you off later.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Albert Palyalunga. I'm the dad of a freshman trumpet player of my favorite program, the music program at the Westfield High School. About a year ago, my son Michael, an 8th grade trumpet player, came to this high school to be introduced to the music program. He came here reluctantly. There was no way that he was ever going to play trumpet again, unless, of course, it was in a video game. After that initial meeting, Michael texted me to say that Not only did he want to continue playing the trumpet, he wanted to sign up for concert band, join the marching band, try out for jazz band, and start private lessons all over again. As a freshman, he has done all that and more. He's a better trumpet player. He has made many good friends. He uses his time more effectively. He is more disciplined. Most of all, he loves being a member of an amazingly dedicated team. Obviously, Mr. Vitale, the leader of this quickly expanding ensemble, and Mr. Sindorf and Mr. Doyle are to be commended for their hard work, musical talent, long hours, enthusiasm, commitment, and dedication. I understand that Mr. Vitale needs more help, more space, and less decibels in the music room for the growing music program. I hope you can help him achieve his goals so that more students can have the wonderful experience that my son is having. Thank you.
Thank you. Again,
Are there any questions?
again, just to clarify, that was with respect to the budget workshop. If speakers could just identify what portion of the budget, what portion of the agenda their questions or comments are on, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. My name is Ed Lara. I live at 8 Village Circle here in Westfield, and my son is a sophomore here at Westfield High School. And like Albert, he is also involved in the music program, and I'm here to provide more color to the personal experience that Albert has had, because there are 200 other Michaels who are enjoying the benefits of the music program here. And because the band is very popular, the band program is very popular, it's well recognized on a regional and a state basis, and actually also on a national basis. Many of you know that just last year, one of the bands was asked to perform at a national event at Avery Fisher Hall, right? So it's very well recognized, and because of that, you have 200 students now who are unfortunately left to attend band class in only 4 classes, 4 sessions. So you've got 50 to 60 students, and this causes a number of problems. The first one being class size and the resulting quality of instruction. As Mr. Palyalunga pointed out, it's not because of any lack of expertise and dedication on the part of the band directors. They're very good at what they do. But as you can imagine, to have 50 to 60 students who each are playing different instruments, it's very tough to provide the right level of instruction during that session. So that's the first issue. The second issue has to do with logistics. I was very surprised during last year's back to school night when I sat in the band room with the other parents, and I looked around and realized that 60 students have to play in a very tight space that was probably built for about 35 to 40, right? And you can imagine large instruments, right? People who are essentially jostling each other as they're trying to learn their music and play to the best of their ability. That causes a lot of problems inside. And think about change in classes also, where you've got 50 students trying to leave the band room, 60 more coming down the stairs to try to get in, causes a lot of problems. The third, though, and most important issue has to do with a very real concern about the safety and the health of our children. I know that the band staff had done some studies, and they used a decibel meter at different times during the day, and they recorded during an average class a range between 85 to 110 decibels. And just to put that in perspective, at its softest, that's the sound of a very loud vacuum cleaner, right? And at its loudest, that's like sitting at the front row of a rock concert. Right? Now, not that the kids are constantly exposed to that level of decibels during the entire 40 to hour-and-a-half session, but they certainly reach those very high and dangerous peaks for concentrated periods in time, right? So there's really a very clear need to address these issues. I know that Mr. Vitale has worked very closely with Dr. King on a number of proposals, and it's made its way into the budget proposal now, I believe, in front of you. And I think what they've come up with is really a very focused recommendation to address 2 of the most pressing concerns. The first is to hire another full-time band director so that the classes can be broken up and so that Westfield High School can offer more classes, smaller class size, better level of instruction. And I think this is particularly important as the popularity of the band programs increase. in large part because of the reputation they've built, in part also because I think Mr. Vitale, together with Mr. Doyle and Mr. Sindorf, do an excellent job in promoting these bands to the elementary and middle schools. We are expecting an increase between 10 to 25% more students coming into the high school and joining the band programs over the next 2 to 3 years. So that problem will just get exacerbated without the addition of another director. And the second part of the proposal has to do with some short-term fixes to address the very real and immediate safety concerns around the noise levels in that very small band room. Part of it has to do with removal of the risers that exist there right now and the addition of acoustic tiles to the ceilings and the walls. That is not, as you can imagine, a permanent fix. The children will still be at risk. But given the very real budget constraints that this board faces, I do think it's a very cost-effective short-term solution. So in closing, and on behalf of Albert, his son Michael, and all the other students and parents who are involved in the band program, I respectfully request that the board give serious consideration to the budget proposal, requesting for one additional band director, as well as the modifications to the existing rehearsal room so that we can remove the risers, get rid of, add the acoustic tiles, and take away the safety issues in the short term. And at the end of the day, doing all of this will ensure that we continue to have a really good group of musicians, and we can continue to build the reputation of the Westfield Musical Program. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? What does removing the risers do? Just simply add more room?
It adds more room because if you go to the band room, there's very little clearance between where the children stand and the height of the ceiling. By removing the risers, there's more ceiling height essentially, so that allows the sound to sort of disperse a bit more. Right now, it's very, very small quarters, tight quarters.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Matt Godin, and I'm a senior at Westfield High School. I live at 1071 Seward Avenue, and I will be speaking to give a student perspective on the band program, and this is on behalf of the budget.
Thank you.
I've been involved in the district band program since 4th grade. 4 of those years have been spent here at WHS, involved in a number of programs the school has to offer, from the concert bands to jazz ensembles, and more recently for my senior year, the marching band. Throughout these years, the band program has tailored to all of my wants and desires, and I've had an unforgettable experience. However, I fear that as the program grows in size, this will not be the case for future students entering the school. If nothing changes, I fear that unfortunate sacrifices will have to be made within the program that can ultimately be avoided. Christopher Vitale entered the school district the same year I entered the high school. In a way, I grew with him these 4 years through the program, and I must say, he is a remarkable man. He has taken up leadership of most music groups at the high school, being all concert bands, a percussion ensemble, and not to mention a jazz ensemble after school, and in the fall, the coordination and direction of the WHS marching band. But his talents can only get him so far. There is a limit at which being remarkable cannot overcome the sheer amount of responsibilities that come alongside being in charge of all these groups. The amount of students in the Westfield High School band program has grown from about 130 kids 4 years ago to now over 200 as of today. This growth is astounding, showing that the program has an extreme potential to develop interest amongst incoming freshmen. But Mr. Vitale needs help. The only assistance he does occasionally get is through the middle school directors, who have plenty of other responsibilities as it stands with their respective schools. Consideration regarding the hiring of another director has never been a more pressing matter than it is now. When certain classes are in demand, more teachers are hired, and I think similarly, when a music program is growing, another director should be hired. Furthermore, and I say this purely as a student who has had band on his daily schedule for 4 years in a row now, that the band room itself is a massive problem. Not only is it crowded, but it has become unsafe. The space is congested, with the symphonic band, one of the 3 concert band groups, containing 80 members. It's a struggle just to fit them all in that one room. Not only has this program outgrown the single director, it has also outgrown the physical facilitation being offered. Additionally, Lesson plans designed to enhance musicality, such as rearranging instrumentation in the room, are rendered impossible due to the risers on the floor. The risers themselves create a tripping hazard for students lugging around large metal instruments, and they need to be removed in order to preserve the safety of the students. And not to mention, at a jazz rehearsal, a decibel reading, as mentioned before, was taken in the room that read over 100 decibels, which is at a level that risks damage to the ear. Soundproofing work needs to be considered as well, with acoustic tiles on the ceiling in order to prevent potentially irreversible damage to students involved with the program. Essentially, with the growing music program, the room has become unsafe and effectively halts musical progress. Now, I fully recognize that these changes are influenced by budget, and I also fully recognize that the board is under a certain level of stress at the moment regarding said budget. But I must urge that these actions are not aimed at luxury, rather they are necessary to maintaining functionality and improvement. We live in a time where the arts are being recognized as a key component of our high school, and to limit them in such a way as they are now would be nearing cruelty to current and future students. Westfield deserves a great band program, and I believe these are steps necessary to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Christopher DeLarso. I'm a graduate of Westfield High School, and I've lived here in town for about 30 years. I'm also here to address the board on the recommendations for the budget with respect to the band room. My son Ed has been in Westfield schools since kindergarten. Band has been a huge part of his life since 4th grade when he started on trombone. He's had some amazing experiences, most especially at the high school. He may tell you that his favorite aspect of band was performing and just doing something really exciting with his friends. But as a parent, I also know that band has been one of the best ways for him to learn teamwork, discipline, leadership, and other skills. Westfield's band program has taken him places and allowed him to do things that very few teens can do. Performing at Lincoln Center at the age of 16. Our band program shows kids what's out there after high school and even after college. It also helps students experience some adult responsibilities, for example, disciplined competition as part of a group and also individually. Our kids live in Westfield, but through the music program, they can be part of a bigger picture. For example, next month, Vienna and Prague. I'm proud of what Ed has accomplished in Westfield's band program, and I'm also proud of the program itself. Ed will be graduating from WHS in June, so you're probably wondering why I chose to speak to you tonight. Well, as a longtime resident who plans to remain here, it is my wish that we keep the momentum of the band program going, that it stays strong, that it stays attractive to both students and parents. I believe it's one of the reasons we choose to live here and not somewhere else. It complements other Westfield traditions, such as the Musical Club of Westfield, which is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. Our band program is undoubtedly part of why Westfield is a desirable town. Since Mr. Vitale has been in Westfield, the program has become extraordinary. And I'd like to see it remain so for every Westfield student who's interested. The ideas before the board will do just that, and therefore go a long way in keeping our program among the best. I think they're well planned and reasonable. For one, the risers in the band room. They worked when the school was built, but their usefulness has passed. Removing them is a smart, low-cost way to alleviate crowding and improve the sound condition. The band room is crowded on a daily basis. For example, our marching band can't really rehearse properly in the band room, partly because of crowding. Removing the risers will make the existing space more versatile, functional, and flexible, and it's a solution that has had great success at both Edison and Roosevelt. No doubt will work successfully here. Acoustical treatment of the ceiling and walls will also help reduce the sound levels that are, unfortunately, inherent in a practice room filled beyond capacity. Another idea, a second full-time band director, accomplishes a number of things. It allows students to work with the band director either individually or in groups of similar instruments, and it's really the only way to make sure a student is learning his or her instrument properly and develop the right kind of habits. Secondly, Westfield's band program is big and getting bigger, as been mentioned before. It was around 120 students about 4 years ago, and today almost 200. Next year projected to be 225. Looking at other schools in central New Jersey with only one full-time band director, the number of band students range from 25 to about 124. Schools with two full-time band directors are in a range between 125 and 199. Some other examples, Scotch Plains is in the 150 to 174 student range with two full-time band directors. South Brunswick, over 200 students and 4 full-time band directors. Because student interest has been so great in Westfield, a third concert band was added, a second jazz band, a percussion class, and a winter color guard. And interest is only going to grow as word continues to get around. But it's important that as we grow, we continue to offer a very high level of music education and a quality experience for the students. And I believe these two solutions will do just that. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Good evening. My name is Liz Mulholland, 1029 Harding Street. I'm a parent of a child who's in band and soccer, so obviously I would support both of those initiatives, understanding the need for the field space as well as the band. It was very impressive. I went to the very first, I guess it was the first annual introduction to band, and as a parent I was shocked at what a wonderful program it was, so kudos on that. I hope it continues. Given the present underfunding of our district and the negative forces in play to fund public schools, I'm also cognizant of the level of difficulty with which this or any needed improvement or upgrade presents to our administration and school board. And thankful that we have such a talented group of hardworking individuals who put our children's needs at the forefront. I'm actively involved in a variety of statewide and nationwide grassroots organizations that support public education. In this capacity, I attend state school board meetings, assembly meetings, and Senate meetings in Trenton. I advocate for support of public schools. I'll be attending 3 meetings within the next week, included in one of those is the budget hearing. I watch bills being passed and mandates being created, mandates that force schools to spend money, in some cases millions of dollars, money the districts cannot afford to spend. This flyaway, underfunded mandate train we have found ourselves on has been allowed to run unfettered because we are all too busy to notice that these issues are even happening until it's already a law. Districts then find themselves scrambling to make ends meet to afford these newly created unfunded mandates. A few of them you might know: No Child Left Behind, transportation, harassment and bullying, and the newest change in policy causing new unfunded, unaffordable change to the park testing. The new unfunded testing mandate comes at a time when the state aid, special ed funding aid has been flat, while costs for those mandates skyrocket. In 2010, the state implemented a funding structure that slashed state aid while concurrently capping the ability to get financial aid from local aid sources at 2%. To make matters worse, the state then added an underfunded mandate costing this district and our taxpayers millions of dollars, and began charging what is no less than a 15% VIG on prior loans. This is called the defunding of schools. Since 2010, statewide, New Jersey's public schools have been underfunded by $6 billion. Since that same time, Westfield has been underfunded by $11 million. Even though the state was ordered to fully fund schools, it kept underfunding them and provided flat funding, all while basic costs increase. These cost increases can be seen strongly in healthcare, special education, transportation, and technology. Most of these increasing costs are directly related to the underfunded mandates forced on districts. Special education costs are in excess of $23 million, yet the aid provided to cost such is $5 million. Transportation costs are $2.7 million, yet the aid to cover such is $121,000. To make matters worse, the state forced districts to comply with new testing format that drove technology costs from $581,000 in 2012-13 year to nearly $2.2 million this year. So $1.5 million cost increase. What did the state pay towards this cost? $60,000. Statewide estimates reported by some districts indicate, sadly, or with compliments to our district and their administrators, that Westfield's costs for this new mandate are actually on the lower end. Some districts are spending $5 to $10 million on their technology upgrades. Sorry, I lost my... These continued underfunded mandates are causing increased costs to taxpayers, and as we can see from budget proposals, more cuts in service to our children and more charges in extracurricular services. Undoubtedly, next year will present the same underfunding, or more, than we see this year. On its own, there is nothing this district can do to alter the path of the defunding of the state and the lack of resources provided. Only we as a community can make this underfunding stop. We need to let our state and federal representatives know that we do not support unfunded mandates that not only raise our local taxes, they cause cuts in programs and leave our infrastructure in dire need of upgrading and repairs. We can no longer allow our schools to be used as a budget gap resource. We must stand up for our children and demand that the state stop defunding all of our schools. The question is, how do we do that? Fortunately, this last round of unfunded mandates caused enormous pushback nationally, and many organizations have organized to do just that. Diane Ravitch, who was the head of the US DOE under the Bush and Clinton administrations, has been a strong advocate for public schools and has what I consider to be a trustworthy organization called Network for Public Education. NPE sends out information on bills that would support or harm public schools and their funding, and provide user-friendly click and send links to reach appropriate legislators on the federal level. Locally, there is now a Facebook page that provides information and alerts that have similar user-friendly links to reach your local and state officials when bills that affect schools are coming up for a vote. You can find that site on Facebook under Westfield Cares About Schools. Please pardon the amount of time I've taken. I hope that I've provided some useful information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Mark O'Neill and I'm Eva O'Neill. We live at 56 Manitou Circle, and we're in the Washington School. And we want to address the busing issue for the kindergarten for next year. At the last board meeting, I think you mentioned possible cut would be to consolidate the 3 buses that go to the Northside School to 1. And we're asking that you reconsider and keep it as it is with the 3 buses. We have a first grader currently at Washington, and he'll be going to 2nd grade. We have a middle one that's going to be going to kindergarten. The first grader, they get out at 3:05. The bus doesn't get back currently until about 3:35 to Washington, but if we consolidate it to 3 buses, I don't think the buses will get back until 3:45, 3:50, I'm not sure. And I think that's just too long of a wait time. We also have a little one in the car that would be with us, and I just think it's just too long of a wait time. And we're asking that you reconsider and keep it to 3 buses.
Yeah, I was just going to add, when I was talking to Eva about it, I was comparing this because everybody's here with their priority and the things that they want, and basically you have to prioritize. And then thinking about it and comparing this, one thing that my understanding is that there's more children in the kindergarten overall next year, and also more in the wraparound. So on its face, it's a significant increase, but on its face, it's very likely there'll be more kids next year than this year. And so just from a comparison standpoint, it doesn't seem to make sense to reduce the number of buses when you have, I think it's more than 50% increase in kids. Not that they'll all be on the bus, but you have to look at their addresses, but it stands to reason there will be more kids. And then just more broadly than that, as I was listening to the other people here, and I think the things that people are saying, they're all worthy requests, But some things are more peripheral to the main purpose, which is education. And in this case, this is transporting the kids to the school in a reasonable way so they can be educated. So I would just ask, when you're thinking about what's the most important, that getting them to the school in the first place reasonably is pretty important before you look at other things that are more peripheral. And the last thing is that my understanding is that the law requires the bus to be provided. And I think I heard a comment at the last meeting when I was watching that that it could it go down to one bus from 3 buses. And I don't think that the criteria should be, are you meeting the bare minimum of the law? Are you providing 1 bus and driving around for an hour? It should be, how many buses should you have? And currently there's 3. There's going to be more kids next year, so perhaps at a minimum, there should at least be the same amount of buses. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dana, can you just refresh our recollection on, is there an estimated cost? Can you estimate the cost of a bus, a route?
Yeah, it varies. The 3 kindergarten buses this year combined cost us $86,000. And this year we have a total, usually it's not even, the highest one day that we had was like 39 kids riding all 3 buses. So we are looking, we haven't made any recommendations yet to reduce buses, but we are looking at the number of kids enrolled next year, the number of kids that are requesting busing, and looking to see if we can consolidate that at all. And we're also looking at other bus routes as well,
Right.
not just kindergarten.
Thanks.
Sorry, would you consider, I think the bus that currently goes to Washington is one of those large buses. I mean, what if you went down to a smaller bus?
We're looking at that as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Henkel. I live at 517 Hort Street, and my son is a senior here at the high school, and my daughter is a 7th grader at Edison. And like some others that spoke before me, I'm speaking on behalf of the band program. So we've already heard from a number of parents and students, so I'm not going to repeat too much of what they said, but definitely want to speak in support of the 3 things that were addressed. One being, probably the first and foremost, regarding the additional support for the band program, supporting Mr. Vitale. You already heard that when my son started with the band program as a freshman, it's already grown about 70% as far as number of students, but yet there's still only 1 director. And if you look at comparable programs, we're looking at probably a minimum of 2, 3, and even some cases 4 directors. So I think that's a very reasonable request. We heard a little bit about the sound levels and also creating the additional space with removing the risers. And then also with the sound concerns and the safety with the acoustic tiles. So, I guess the reason I'm speaking is a little bit of a different perspective. We moved here about 5 years ago from Texas, and, for some of the students who know my son, he's kind of embarrass him now, but he was an undersized kid when he came here. And, one of the great things that the band program did for him is it gave him a sense of kind of an identity and purpose, because we moved here, like I said, from Texas, where he didn't know anybody, and he wasn't really strong in the band program, but really just embraced it. And just thinking of some of the things that we're talking about, where the kids got to perform, the places they got to go, how it instilled some of the discipline, the education, the structure, the things that they're getting to see, experience. Even above and beyond all of that, I think one of the biggest testaments is his younger sister, who you consider 2 teenagers that are 5 years apart that are siblings. She's actually now inspired by what he's doing and has decided she wants to actually join the band program here. So while my son's going to be leaving this summer, in another year and a half, my daughter is going to be joining. So all those concerns that are raised are very relevant, because I now expect that my daughter, because of what the band program has done for my son, it's going to be doing a lot of the same for my daughter. And so a lot of those concerns that are addressed are very real to me as well. So we've really kind of heard a lot of the same things, so I'll pause there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Flax, 93 Fairhill Drive, and I'm here to talk about the budget. Many wonderful people have come before me talking about the needs of their child, and I have been in their position in different places in my life. I was the person with the kindergartner coming from a wraparound program, and I stood in the bushes and made sure the bus delivered him safely, and I had 2 other small children. So I understand the need of direct transportation. Even now, my children are now in high school. I do have 2 children who participate in the wonderful band program here. We heard the lovely people from the fencing club speak here, and I remember several years ago there was the need to cut the fall play. My child was a person who did the fall play. There are so many things that we are discussing tonight that affect our children directly. And as you go into the budget, and one of the questions I have for Ms. Sullivan that hopefully as we go through the budget process is, how much does the park test cost our budget? What does it cost in technology? What does it cost in subs? What does it cost in training? Because all of these lovely people who came before me have specific needs of their children for every day. And so when you weigh these very heavy costs in technology and what may it cost to have subs come into the school or the training that teachers have to go through, and I know that the budget is under great strain and we are under state mandates, but please, within those millions of dollars, look at the needs of the band, the kindergartners, the fencing club, and I'm sure there's many other needs as well. I know I was here last year looking for auditorium improvements that are supposed to be continued this year. And all these things directly impact the people we care about most, which is our children. And as I was reading today online, which was very fascinating, is Steve Jobs and a lot of people in the technology industry actually choose to send their children to school where there is less computers. Because all of these other things that are discussed have nothing to do with technology, but enrich our children's lives. So when you're looking at the budget and making difficult decisions, please think about our children and the things that enrich our lives and provide a full, comprehensive education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with a question or comment, recognizing that comments on lighting will be under facilities? All right. With that, I would move to personnel. Mark.
Okay, I'd like the board to consider personnel items 1 through 12. Second. Mitch, thank you. Dr. Dolan, retirements?
Yes, we have 2 retirements this evening. Tonight, I'm announcing with regret the retirement of Catherine Haldeman. For more than 23 years, Catherine has served as the nurse at Wilson School. She is a dedicated, conscientious professional who cares deeply about Wilson students. She's proud of her profession and is committed to providing a safe environment. And we certainly wish Catherine the best. For 25 years, our second retiree has been a secretary at Jefferson School, and this retiree is Dorothy Sarna. And each morning during those 25 years, she was a face welcoming students and staff. She is unflappable, positive, and caring. She knows all of the students and their families and enjoys seeing the students grow during their time at Jefferson. We certainly wish her the best as she and her husband move to Toms River to enjoy living near the rest of their family. We wish both of these retirees the best going forward.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Dana?
Rich Matessa?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler? Yes. Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
All right, that brings us to facilities. There's only one motion on the facilities agenda. I would ask the board to consider motion number 1. Do I have a second? Ginny, thank you. So I'd like to just say a few words. We'll open it up to the board and others. I just want to remind people how we got here, because there will be people who are new in the audience tonight, and also if you're watching this on video. The Westfield Soccer Association approached the Board of Education approximately 5 to 6 weeks ago through our business administrator, Dana Sullivan. Facilities met with the WSA on February 12th, and the Facilities Committee is typically the first stop for any item that comes before the board with respect to facilities, unless it's a minor item. Facilities agreed to have the Westfield Soccer Association present for a full board discussion in public on February 17th. The board did meet on the 17th. The Westfield Soccer Association presented. Our athletic director provided her input. The board gave input, asked questions, and we took questions from others. As the board noted that evening, we weren't there to take action. The purpose of that meeting was to gather information, invite comment, and specifically to have the presentation that the Soccer Association gave to the Facilities Committee given to the full board. Since that meeting, the board has received many emails and comments, both in favor and opposed to the proposal with respect to lighting at Keeler Field. In support of the proposal, I would just summarize it as increased practice time for high school athletes and for town soccer and lacrosse athletes. Opposing the proposal, I would say there were several things. Noise and lights from local residents were among the biggest concerns. I think it's worth noting before I comment on noise and lights that there were several other concerns that don't actually result from the proposal. For example, use of the PA system, actual soccer and lacrosse games. The proposal before the board right now is only as exactly set forth in the agenda. It doesn't include things like games. But the noise and light are in fact part of the proposal. And because of the many emails received in that regard, the board did ask the Westfield Soccer Association to set up just a single generator for a couple of hours at Keeler so that we could go just listen because what the Soccer Association was saying was, I think, dramatically different from some of the emails that we had gotten with respect to sound coming from these particular generators. Fortunately, the Westfield Soccer Association was able to comply on what was short notice. If you remember, this meeting was supposed to take place a week ago. They did give us an option of setting up that generator outside of this meeting if we wanted. The Facilities Committee didn't think that that made sense, wanting to hear the generator in its natural location, so where it's going to sit when it's in use. Personally, I spent a good amount of time that night, that Friday night, listening to the generator, as I have heard other board members have as well. Listening to the sound, looking at the lights, smelling for diesel, all things that we had received emails that would be nuisances in the neighborhood. I personally did this from several locations, both on foot and by car. And while we recognize that one generator is by no means 4 generators, I do believe that asking the Westfield Soccer Association to set up one generator was a useful exercise because, as I said, we did get these disparate positions on what a generator sounds like. So at this point, I'd open it up to the board just to hear what board members thought about the generator and lighting. Then I would take any comments or questions from the board, after which I'd let the Soccer Association comment if they have anything they want to add to the proposal or comment. Also, Sandy Mamery, our athletic director, is here. I would let her comment. And then, of course, as I said, any comments or questions from the public, the microphone will be open. It's not a race to the microphone. So with that, I'll open it up to board members. Any comments or thoughts on what you saw, heard, smelled, or anything else?
No, I'd agree with what you said, Rich. I drove. It was a pretty cold night and had the windows open, driving around, and until I got 3 to 5 feet away, didn't hear the generator. And I was very impressed. I hadn't seen lights like that before in action, and I was very impressed how they were just directed right on the field and nowhere in that neighborhood, which I used to live in, so I can appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments? All right. I did say Peter Franks, I know, is here tonight, other representatives of soccer. You don't have to speak, but you're welcome to if you want to. And if you do, please go to the microphone, just state your name and address and any comments you have.
Actually, I think that Steve Aronson will speak for the Soccer Association. He's the club president. If you do have questions, though, on particulars, I have, most of that general information if you want to get it.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I just want to begin by thanking
If you could just, I know he said it, but if you just state your name and address for the record, thank you.
Steve Aronson. My address is 615 Westfield Avenue.
Thank you.
I just want to begin by saying thank you to the board for allowing us to make the proposal and for you to seriously consider it. I also want to take a moment and thank all the members of the club that have come out tonight to express their support. I expect that you're going to hear from several of them about what this proposal means to them personally and for their families. I also want to take a moment and thank the neighbors around Keller to come out also. They have real concerns, and perhaps there's a way to elevate our proposal so it's better for all. I'm not going to take too much time to rehash all of the benefits. Again, I think many of the members of the club are going to come up and talk about that. What I do want to just remind the board of is that this is not a problem that has resulted overnight. It's really been a problem that has started back in 2006. Why 2006? That's when there was a very sharp increase in youth sports, not necessarily soccer, but other sports. And a result of that increase, there's just been, it's basically a supply and demand issue. There's just not enough field space to accommodate the growing youth sports. I think our club has been very innovative and imaginative in terms of how we've been dealing with the allocations that have been provided. But I think we're past the tipping point at this point where we're asking unreasonable burdens upon our members. They have to drive their kids to training locations outside of town. They have unreasonable training times which conflict with afternoon activities from the high school or middle school. And in addition, the opportunity to play on a quality field where many of our fields are what we would consider substandard. So we believe that the proposal benefits in excess of 1,000 directly or indirectly in our club, as well as many high school athletes, and we respectfully ask that you support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy, do you have anything you wanted to add for the board's consideration, or are you good? If there's questions, I know you're here, so. Just state your name, address, or occupation. Thanks.
It's funny, but I could do that. 180 Cottage Place. So the impact that this will have is it will definitely give us another hour and a half of practice time. I think that we really just need to recognize that this is for practice. This is not for games. And when we're dealing with the amount of kids that participate in the spring sports, especially that use that facility, the hour and a half would be a huge advantage for us. And then I'll take questions, answer whatever questions are left.
Great. No, just if you could be available if questions come up, that'd be great. Did anybody on the board have questions for Sandy at this time? All right. Then I would open this up to the public for questions or comments. Please, again, just state your name, address, and address the board. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Bridget Tarleton. I live at 459 Beechwood Place. I have a lot of questions. I know it was just mentioned that the problem with soccer has been around since 2006. I'm just noticing from all the town council's notes that the problem with parking for Keller precedes that. That goes back way earlier than 2002. The situation with Keller, as I see, is that it's a field that was built and somebody forgot the parking lot. It's a big field. It's a nice field. It started out as grass, and so perhaps that wasn't an issue in the beginning. But I know it's a major concern now amongst the town, not the Board of Ed, but the town councils, the planning boards. When you read all their notes, typically,
every few months or so, the parking situation on Rahway comes up quite often. So I'm going to start with some of my questions. The board put a ban on, as I see it, on player drop-off on Rahway Avenue. So does this mean that all the players have to get dropped off at Edison? That's the rule. All players for Keller Field have to get dropped off at Edison School in their parking lot. And I know that parking lot, there's a problem. They're trying to enlarge it or make more spaces. I think they were able to add 19 spaces in the last couple of years. But that's a problem. That's not clearly enough. Also, that parking lot only has 4 lights. I don't know if anyone goes there at night for some of the meetings. I know I go there for Girl Scout meetings, and it's pitch black there. It's also crowded there many nights. That's a separate issue. So do the players have to get dropped off at the Edison lot? Will they be instructed to? How will that be enforced? Will there be a crossing guard for them to get across Rahway? Because there isn't a light there where they would cross. I've only seen children get hit by cars on Westfield Avenue, not Rahway, but apparently there have been children that have been hit on Rahway. So that's a concern. When there are scheduled evening meetings at Edison, will all the practices be suspended? So just as we're using this school for a meeting right now and the parking lot is filled, when Edison has meetings and that's filled, will an alert go out to all the players that practices are canceled for that night? And Edison's used very regularly. I don't know if you're aware of that. So who has priority for use of the parking lot? If that's for players or if that's for school meetings and all extracurricular school-associated meetings. Moving down, since this is a pilot program, who will oversee it? It's a conflict of interest for the WSA to pilot their own, to monitor their own piloted program as an outside vendor. It should be from an outside source. Perhaps that'll be the members of the BOE. Will you evaluate the effects of the lights? And will you be visiting residents' homes? I know it was suggested that you went down there the other night, it was cold, and you looked at the lights and how they shone. I spoke to someone on the planning board, and they said the lights are an issue. They were sympathetic. They said if there were 80-foot lights shining down, that would be less intrusive. These lights are built to shine out, so if you live across the field on certain nights, it can go into your home. It's not the same at all the times. But to me, more importantly, is the noise levels. I know you were there on a freezing cold, snow-filled night, and it wasn't probably that windy. On a regular night, say 6:15, when track's out there, you can hear them from our homes. You can hear conversations. So I think it needs to be evaluated, not on a quiet night when no players are on the field, but maybe when there's all 60 or 50 players on the field. Is anyone listening to see how that noise travels? Because you can hear it everywhere with the windows closed. So, but these would be warm evenings with the windows open. So at 8:45, 9:45 on a Tuesday night, there is sound in our homes. There will be. There isn't now, but there will be. Sound travels. Lights, that is not the problem. So will you be visiting the homes, or will you hire people to come visit our homes and listen to the sound in my bedroom at 9:45 on a Tuesday? I noticed some of you were yawning earlier, and it's late. It gets late. We get tired. And will you schedule these evaluations? Will they be? Will you get us a notice when you're coming to our houses to come to our bedrooms and listen to the noise? The trainers and coaches are typically heard within the homes of the residents. So if they do not use whistles, I still hear their voices. I hear what they're saying. I hear what they're telling your kids. Will they be given instructions not to raise their voices for all evening practices? Will they conduct their practices in low voices and whispers? What are the repercussions of excessive noise? Will they be fined? Will the practices be suspended then and there? Who do the residents complain to on those evenings when the coaches are being too loud? Should we call a BOE member? Will you give us like a hotline? Or should we call the police? Has Westfield Police Department been informed of the proposed plan? Have they had an opportunity to assess the risks given the poor visibility on Rahway Avenue? Have they had the opportunity to inform the BOE about the number of car accidents involving children both on Rahway and Westfield Avenue at the location of the field? Have there been any discussions on paying for a traffic light to be installed at Keller Field so that the students and players can cross the street to the parking lot? Why are the lights insured? What are they insured against? What are the risks? The diesel fuel is being used. Is it being monitored? Is it just generators outside at all given times? Does the BOE need to purchase additional insurance to cover any liabilities that are not covered by the company that makes the lights? Are there any plans to plant trees to block the visibility, to block the sound? Will the WSA compensate any damage to the parks attached to the field? Have there been funds set aside for cleanup, repairs, damages? Has the BOA discussed this pilot program with the town council and the planning board? As of last week, the planning board said no. They were surprised. Are they in support of it? Does it conflict with the lighting and noise ordinances in the master plan? Will there be a meeting between the BOE and the planning board to determine the acceptability of the pilot program in lieu of the parking problems associated with the field? When will these questions be answered? Will they be answered before you vote or not?
Is that it?
No, there's one more question. For this pilot program, I feel like you're putting the cart before the horse. It's sort of a let's do it and then see what problems happen. Will there be a car accident on Rahway or on Westfield Avenue? Will any of these kids get hit crossing the street? The fields will change repeatedly. So it won't be just the 30 kids or 40 kids that get dropped off. During a switch, there could be 80 kids switching off in a very small area. So you can run the pilot and then see if there's a problem. That seems counterintuitive, though. Thank you.
Good evening, Greg Casco, 434 Everson Place. I want to read from a prepared statement so I don't miss any points that I intend to make tonight.
Could you speak a little slower, please? I'm having
Yes, I will.
trouble. Thank you.
I've lived in town for 43 years, the past 22 years as a resident of Everson Place. I live 2 doors in from Westfield Avenue. When my wife and I moved into our home, we knew that the football stadium hosted 4 to 5 football games, home games a year, typically on Saturday mornings. Occasionally, the high school soccer and lacrosse teams would use the field. When a synthetic surface was installed at Kaler Stadium, we were told it would allow more usage by Westfield High School athletics. Soon, men's and women's soccer, lacrosse, and women's field hockey teams began to utilize the field more often. It didn't stop there. Kaler Stadium is now used by non-Board of Education sports, including PAL football, rugby, soccer and lacrosse, as well as physical fitness boot-type camp activities, or boot camp-type activities. The field is being used 7 days a week. As I sit on my front porch or inside with the windows open, within earshot of the stadium's activities, I've had to deal with the abuse of the public address system to the point where elementary-age school children commandeer the public address system. They've been rapping to Who Let the Dogs Out before games, sending shout-outs to their friends in attendance. It does get old after a while. While I understand that the WSA said that no games will be played, no whistles will be used, and that the lights are a temporary pilot program, I once again ask this board, a pilot program for what? Is this a pilot program for permanent lighting at Kaler Field? The town, with our tax dollars, just resurfaced Houlihan Sid Fay on Lambert's Mill Road. It's my understanding that the fees collected by the Westfield Recreation Department for the use of that field by the WSA and other organizations would cover a majority of the replacement costs. Does anyone here, including the WSA, have an idea of how much or what percentage of the replacement costs were covered by usage fees? While the WSA and this board might lead the public to believe that the pilot program will have little or no effect on the lifespan of the synthetic turf at Kaler Field, the bottom line is that any time you set foot on the surface, it's being used and its lifespan is decreased. Stadium lights, whether temporary or not, do not belong in a residential neighborhood protected by land use ordinances that were established to protect the rights of the homeowners in that neighborhood. No engineering studies were done with regards to lighting intensity and light spillage, nor were any professional sound studies done regarding the decibel levels emitted from the lighting generators. No engineering studies were done with regards to the lighting intensity by a professional. As a board, you went down and you saw what they emitted. With all due respect, unless you're an engineer, you cannot provide the results. A demonstration of the temporary lights by the WSA for this board is not an acceptable replacement for professional testing results. The WSA is merely quoting the manufacturer's specifications. Mr. Matesic, you stated that one of the benefits of lighting Kaler Field was it would benefit the Westfield High School sports programs. As far as I know, there has never been an issue with Westfield High School athletics finding time for practice on Board of Education fields. Correct me if I'm wrong. I see this as an attempt by the Westfield Soccer Association to use the influence of the Board of Education to further their agenda. Currently, Kaler Field is in violation of some of Westfield's land use ordinances, and we, the neighbors of that stadium, have not addressed them. We've remained silent. The installation of temporary lighting will open up a Pandora's box regarding some of those violations. Has this board sought an opinion from its legal counsel on how it can allow this use on property which does not contain a school or administrative office without first going to the town government for permission? I was hoping that your board attorney would be here tonight, Mr. Kaplow. I do have a letter that I'd like to leave with you to give him regarding the issue. Sure. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Miss Jean Collins, 762 Westfield Avenue. Thank you for the Board of Ed for allowing an open session of people to come and speak about your issues. I watched the February presentation by Mr. Franks, and there were some points that I wanted to address. Firstly, I raised my family here. Both my children were involved in sports. They love the town, they love the schools, and I back kids being in sports. I think it's a great activity, keeps them energized and makes them part of a team, and I think it's a wonderful thing. I looked up the website of the WSA, and I was surprised to find some of these facts. One, it is the largest soccer club of its kind in New Jersey, and it's big business. There are 70 teams, there are numerous sponsors, and there are an awful lot of parents who are paying for their children to participate in this program. Their website lists they use 19 fields. I would like to suggest that if they want to try a pilot program with lights, that instead of going into a residential neighborhood, they try it out in one of their fields, such as Echo Lake, which does not have houses surrounding it. Last year, just on the Westfield High School games schedule on the line, not practices, Kaler Field hosted 22 high school games in September, 26 in October, 9 in November. Those numbers don't include the daily practices or the track events. This spring's schedule for lacrosse numbers over 32 games beginning in March, going through May. Saturday games will begin at 9, the weekday games begin at 4. In the fall, PAL football with really little kids, 8 years old, 7 years old, up to probably 12. Starts on Sunday mornings. They show up at 8 a.m. They play past 3. And they all have the use of the sound system. Now, I'm aware that the Westfield Soccer Association is saying there won't be any whistles, there won't be any crowds, they'll just be practicing, but I've lived in the neighborhood for a very long time. Practices are loud. Coaches have to yell to tell their kids what to do. It's not a whispering kind of session. It's yelling. And lights, you know, not everybody is up till 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. Over 12% of the population in our town is over 65. So I'm going to take a guess that at least 12% of the people in the neighborhood of the field are over 65. Maybe they've stopped working. Maybe they go to bed earlier than 9:30 at night. And the explosion of use since the turf field was put in and voted on by less than 80 people. That's how small the margin was when it was put in. Turned a very quiet residential neighborhood into a constant noise. It's not a hum. And so when I hear that there'll be 4 generators, I know what generators sound like. We have one. We got it after Hurricane Sandy. I can't imagine what 4 is going to sound like. I know what lights look like. My husband works in a field with those kind of lights, and they each have 4 bulbs. So 16 lights, it's not going to be on a little teeny bit because they're using the whole field. And the field is the size of an acre. So I, in closing, would like to say I believe that lights have no place in a residential neighborhood, whether they're temporary or not. I think that if they have the field use of Echo Lake, as it states on their website, that they should try temporary lights there, or they should try lights where it does not impact residents. I was brought up with the golden rule that you treat others the way you'd like to be treated. And I have been asking everyone I know in this town if they would want lights and generators in their backyard, and every single person has said no. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Greg Lemberg, 528 Grove Street. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak our mind on this issue. It's obviously quite controversial given the crowd. My wife and I and my family have been residents for 17 years on Grove Street. I'm a former WSA coach for the Intercounty division of their organization. And I'm also, with my wife, the person who submitted the letter to the board on February 24th with the 50 signatures of the people in the neighborhood requesting that this motion be turned down. I have fundamentally 3 points that I wanted to raise, one of which has already been very eloquently stated, and that is the change in quality of life in the neighborhood over the years, especially since the turf field had gone in. You know, I think the folks before me have already summarized that very nicely. It's now a 7-day field during the spring and fall season. There's constant activity, constant noise from the players, the fans, the coaches, the PA system. Excessive traffic in the neighborhood. Often our driveway is blocked in by people who have parked inappropriately and have blocked the apron of our driveway, which makes it dangerous for us to enter or leave our own home. And you know, it's really quite intrusive, especially on the weekends, even inside of our house. Our house is an old house with 14-inch stone walls, double pane insulated glass windows, and we can hear everything that goes on in the field and doubly, triply when the PA system is in use. So it's really been an intrusion in our life and our family's life. The second point is around the benefit that this proposal brings. I'm not clear on some of the statements that I've heard tonight. One is the benefit to the Westfield High School sports program. Given that daylight savings time has just come, twilight ends well after 7 o'clock, which is when the WSA is proposing to begin to use the field. So I'm not really sure how the lighting is benefiting the school sports program, given that daylight is good till 7 o'clock at this time of the year and will only get better as the year goes on. The other is the benefit that the WSA is likely to see from this proposal. It was stated that there's 70 teams involved in the program. If you do the math, each team on average will see probably less than 4 hours of additional playing time in the 10-week period that's been talked about. It seems a relatively minimal benefit given the burden that it's going to put on the neighborhood. And finally is what the incremental impact to the neighborhood will be on top of the already heavy use of the field that's been already stated. I believe I read it in one of the articles in the Leader that this total program will span 127 hours. That's what the neighbors will experience. The players will experience 3 or 4 hours, but the neighborhood is going to be impacted 127 hours across the 10 weeks. That brings with it not just the noise from the generators and not just the light from the lights, but all the other associated activity, the traffic, the noise from the field, the players, the coaches, etc. This further erodes the quality of life that the neighborhood is going to have. And so on that basis, I would, as the previous speakers would propose that the board not consider this, this proposal. And what I would suggest is that the sports programs outside of the school district, outside of the school-sponsored programs like the varsity sports, consider to live within the means that they have. I understand that the sports programs have exploded over the years, that there's less and less time and fixed field time available. But we all have to live within our means in one way or another. And I would suggest that the sports programs consider that. And if they do look to expand capacity, that they do it in such a way that it doesn't impact the quality of life of any of the residents, not just the ones around Keller. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amy Root. I live at 177 Harrison Avenue. Yes, it's on the north side. Yes, it is not adjacent to the field. I have children at Westfield High School and at Roosevelt School. We've been residents for 16 years. They've been active in soccer, lacrosse, PAL football, high school football. I will tell you that high school sports are affected by what time the sun sets, by what the weather does to how dark it is at certain times of the day. My son was on the JV football team, and after daylight savings in the fall, they didn't get a full game in once on a Monday afternoon because games have to start at 4 or 4:30 to accommodate, of course, the educational schedule, and they couldn't get a full game in. The only time they got a full game in was when we traveled to 100 and Central and played under their lights. There was also a game where my son was on the chain gang, and he heard the kids from Watchung Hills saying, well, go ahead and keep playing in the dark, that's fine. If we fall and get hurt, we'll just sue the Westfield School District. So I think trying the lights for 2 months at no cost to the Board of Ed at a time when we are all debating very wonderful options for our kids, whether they're inside or outside the classrooms. I think it's a very reasonable test, and I've spoken to a lot of people who agree with me who aren't here. Hopefully some people will get up who will think it's a good idea as well. But I just want you to know we're out there, we think it's a good idea, and we encourage you to consider it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening. My name is Dan Carmagno. I'm the resident at 521 Grove Street, Westfield, New Jersey. And tonight, residents surrounding Kaler Field are requesting that the Board of Education immediately table the vote to allow night lighting on Kaler Field on behalf of Westfield Soccer Association. The very act of executing this vote violates our rights on several counts as citizens of this town. It is a blatant disregard of the land use ordinance, which is designed to protect our rights. There's a couple items. First one, and I'll try and cut this short, failure to apply for a permit under the land use ordinance, and illegal action by the Board of Education to claim jurisdiction of the approval process reserved for the boards and officials specified under the land use ordinance. Per the official zoning map, Kaler Field is rated as residential RS12 and is surrounded by residential zones. Per 11.06C of the land use ordinance, the athletic field is a conditional use property. Per 2.06L, conditional use must comply with the standards of the location and be approved by the planning board. At a minimum, the Board of Education must still file for approval a conditional use application per 18 of the land use ordinance. Furthermore, the board has illegally assumed the authority for making said approval independent of the planning board, i.e. the vote tonight. 2.05 G and H of the land use ordinance clearly implies any action by a third party on the Board of Education property is not covered under the conditional use ordinance. What does that mean? That means that the Westfield Soccer Association involvement negates the conditional use permit allowance. Therefore, the Board of Education must ensure that a full permit with associated fees and variance requests be filed. Okay, the other two issues of concern that I have. Failure of proposed lights to conform to land use ordinance standards and failure to apply for variance approvals for multiple non-conformances. The land use ordinance does not exempt temporary use of lighting per 6.03. Furthermore, the claim for temporary usage under a pilot program for several days a week for 3 months for an entire practice season is dubious at best. Furthermore, notices sent out by the Westfield Soccer Association to some of its members indicate there is every intention to use this action to promote further expansion of the field's use. The attempt to erect temporary lights does not preclude the need for approval under the land use ordinance. 1011D of the land use ordinance specifies the maximum height of 15 feet for light fixtures. The height of the proposed lights is 25 feet and requires a variance approval per the land ordinance. 1011E quantifies the maximum illumination at the property line. Per the land use ordinance, the burden of proof that this quantitative limit is met at the surrounding home boundaries rests with those seeking the lights, not the neighbors. Precluding an engineering study, it is the firm belief of Kaler Field neighbors, based on experience with temporary lighting used on the field in the past, that this standard is exceeded and requires a variance. Furthermore, the Board of Education is not technically qualified to make a determination and is not the legal arbiter. Review rests with the authority specified under the land use ordinance. Regulation 1011F, duration of illumination at the property line, is meant to ensure lighting is not detrimental to abutting properties. Neighbors to Kaler Field firmly believe the lighting will be detrimental to their personal lives at night in their own homes. Again, the burden of proof is not with the neighbors. Again, authorities specified per the land use ordinance, not the Board of Education, are the arbiters, with input from interested parties. Per 1019D 2 and 3, buffers are required to shield neighbors from excess lighting and noise. It also specifies what an adequate buffer is. Kaler Field is already in non-compliance with this standard. That's why you hear little boys in your bedroom at night. There are few to no buffers between the field and several houses along Grove Street, Washington Street, and Westfield Avenue. Furthermore, past experience documented by neighbors through local newspaper and letters to the Board of Education already affirm an increase in noise impacts to the community with increased field use since the installation of artificial turf. Extended field hours under lights at night when families are at home will further exacerbate this non-compliance condition. In addition, the action increases concerns and liabilities to the homeowners, including but not limited to, and you've already heard these tonight, excess vehicle and pedestrian traffic on a regular basis on streets with inadequate lighting. It's residential lighting, it's not public lighting. Excess noise from traffic, the field, and pedestrians in what is zoned as a residential neighborhood. Increased liability for neighbors due to use of sidewalks at night on streets illuminated for residential use only. Be aware that this is just a cursory review of what the neighbors have found. Further diligent review by lawyers, town officials, and town boards responsible for enforcement of this regulation will likely articulate even more concerns. This neighborhood undoubtedly contains many families, some with small children, including mine. The Board of Education has put temporary lighting on the field on more than one occasion and sought to install permanent lighting. The Board of Education would do wise to revisit those hearings related to those past actions. There have been disturbances and disruptions to families in the neighborhood as documented in those hearings. Whether a game or just practice, these concerns still exist. As you've heard tonight, even if it's a practice, the noise carries because there's no barriers and there's no control. No popular movement by the Board of Education or a third-party user or the gifting of monetary or physical assets gives the Board of Education the right to violate the land use ordinance and to usurp the authority of the officials and boards responsible for upholding the same regulation. These laws and boards exist to protect our rights as citizens and property owners. This is not the first time the Board of Education attempted to circumvent our rights under this ordinance. It is clear to the surrounding neighborhood that this is a conscious attempt to violate our rights and erode our quality of life and financial investment in our own homes. We consider the Board of Education and the officials and boards responsible for upholding the land use ordinance liable for this action and are failing to discharge their sworn duty as public servants on this matter. This action must be immediately dropped from further consideration and is subject per 21 of the land use ordinance to warrants, abatement notices, and per 21.02c court action by interested parties, i.e. neighbors of Kaler Field. And I hate coming up here and reading that. This is the third time I've been before the Board of Education regarding lights on the field. First two times, I was a single person in my own home and I couldn't sleep at night. I walked around wondering why, and there was noise on the field and lights on the field. I am married now and I have small children, and I want him to go to sleep at night in his own bed and wake up the next day for school. I don't think he's going to be able to do that if this thing goes through. And I understand the concerns about the sports programs. I'll be honest, my kids are one of those making noise on the field. They use the track for the Y. My youngest is begging me to sign him up for football. My oldest loves soccer, but the reality is I got to put my kids to bed at night. And I got to get them up the next morning for school. And I have not been given any confidence. There has not been adequate process and study to make sure that that won't happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Derek Chen. I live at 921 Irving Avenue. I've lived in town since 1995. I've lived at Irving Avenue since 2001. I have two children, both boys, 15 and 12. They no longer play soccer, but that's not the reason why I'm here. I've been a volunteer with WSA since 2004. I have been on the board since, I want to say 2008. And currently my position with the board is I run the inter-county program for WSA. The inter-county program this spring has over 420 children and counting still. The season starts in a few weeks. My goal is to include as many children as we can. Right now registration's closed, and I'm still getting emails to see if I have a spot for the sons and daughters of our residents to play soccer this spring. We have kids playing from 3rd grade until 12th grade, from the ages of 8 to 18. These kids play because they want to play, not because they're forced to play. This is a recreation program, and as part of our mission for WSA for this program is to create a fun, safe, positive soccer environment. And not just for the children, not just for the players. It's for the coaches, for the parents and spectators, for the referees. They're all entitled to a fun, safe, positive soccer environment, and it's all of their responsibilities to create that environment. The players, the coaches, the referees, and the spectators. I never thought fields would come into play, but they are. I'm not sure that we can provide a safe soccer environment given our current field situation. Right now, we have to send kids to Garwood, Cranford, Mountainside, possibly Roselle, Summit, Berkeley Heights, and Edison for our kids to practice soccer for Westfield Soccer Association. It's just, I can't guarantee the quality of those fields. They're not in our control. If there's a problem with a Westfield field, the BOE or Sandy is very responsive to our needs, because it's also being responsive to their needs. Bruce Kaufman at the rec department is very responsive to the quality of the fields as well. I can't guarantee the safety or the quality of the fields in the county or in other towns, and that's a safety issue for us. Thank you for taking the time to hear us out. I just want to also thank everyone for coming out here today. You know, Westfield Soccer Association is a volunteer organization, and there are a lot of volunteers on both sides of this issue. And our program is one of the largest soccer programs in the state because of the volunteers that we have. And so I want to thank everyone here also for that. And the last thing I'll say is, if this is the biggest issue facing our town and our school, then I think we're doing pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Blake, Carlton Road. I would ask the previous speaker whether or not his financial support of the foreign fields might be of some benefit in being able to control the safety of where they're playing. And certainly if they're not playing there, the benefits that they give to these various fields would be withdrawn and would be an impetus to those fields to straighten out. The problem I see much more so is when you look at the ordinances in Westfield, the Board of Education is rather independent in what it can do concerning its land where the schools are and where your administrative buildings are. However, other lands that you own are subject to the control of the town and the town ordinances. And what you're dealing with is that you are the landowners, not the Westfield Soccer Association. They can walk away from this without the slightest problem. You, however, are going to be subject to people who are now going to start looking at your failure to buffer, your failure to do numerous things concerning what one neighbor is usually required to do when impinging on the other neighbor's peace and quiet. And while they have suffered through much, according to them, they've done nothing. I'm not going to be bothered by lights because I'm on Carlton Road, and the lights are certainly not going to extend that far. But certainly, there is absolutely no doubt I can hear at my property what's going on at the stadium when there's practices, when there are games, and certainly when the public address system is being used, either for announcements or music. It is hearable everywhere. It may not go to the north side, but it certainly goes as far as Carlton Road, and it is somewhat annoying at times. But certainly living next door to it, I think it would be horrible. I don't understand how you can impinge on others or be accused of it, or leave yourself open as landowners for getting a ticket. Every single one of the surrounding neighbors, it would seem, would certainly have the right to swear out a ticket against you for improper use of your land and the impingement on them because of light, noise, hours that you're going to be using it. And generally, the Board of Education, not the Westfield Soccer Association, would have to respond. You're the landowner, and you're supposed to be representatives of the public of Westfield, not a private corporation that is a for-profit corporation that uses the name Westfield. I mean, there are a lot of places around here that use the name Westfield. You have the Westfield Greater Chamber of Commerce. They could come in, and they are as good an eleemosynary group as the Westfield Soccer Association. They do good work. I do not detract from the good work done by the Soccer Association. But you're supposed to be here for the benefit of the Westfield taxpayers, not for those who love sports. I would suggest that as neighbors and as public officials of Westfield, your interest should be in the protection of Westfield, not some private profit corporation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board. My name is Laura Studwell. I live at 444 Birch Place in Westfield. And our younger son has had the benefit of being a member of the Westfield Soccer Association now for about 10 years. He's currently a player on the FC Premier Cosmos U15 team. And I feel that I speak on behalf of many of the parents on our team and many of the teams, both in the WSA and in the FC Premier system, in advocating that the board pass the resolution for the temporary lighting of the field. And I'm certainly sensitive to the concerns of the residents in the area. But as in any instance such as this, it's a balancing test. Would the inconvenience for a 2.5-month period for a few hours a night outweigh the great benefit to 70 teams who would have the added use of a very, very top-notch field for their lacrosse and soccer practice? Mr. Blake brought up a good point. The board is representing the benefit and the concern of the town of Westfield and the public. Well, about 10 years ago, when the board recommended to the town that they approve the $1.38 million referendum for the turfing of Kaler, the board stated there was a critical shortage of playing fields and that Kaler was consistently underutilized. And unfortunately, I think those phrases ring true today as well. We could have many more hours in the evening in a pilot program to see how it works, to see if it's an inconvenience to the residents, to see how the lights affect the residents. But I think that the benefit far outweighs the inconvenience to the 50 signatories to the petition that was given to the board. Looking at it from a public interest perspective, we had a bond referendum of $1.38 million to turf Kaler. Now, I think there is a great interest on behalf of many taxpayers to see the highest and best use for Kaler Stadium. And as a soccer mom and previously a lacrosse mom, we really feel that the addition of the lights for those limited time periods would certainly benefit far more people than the inconvenience to the other residents. Thank you for your time, and we would request that the lights be approved.
Thank you.
My name is John Eldridge, 437 Everson Place, and lifelong resident of Westfield, raised my kids here. Been a soccer coach, it's a great program. And you know, I had a bunch of notes of what I was going to say. Most of them were covered, but the previous speaker really brought something up that I think goes to the point of it. It is a balancing act. It is a balancing act. What are we balancing? We're balancing the needs of the Westfield Soccer Association and those kids against a relatively small number of people in the area around that field. So I can't see how that's a balance. It's almost like I'm being asked to put a great weight on my shoulders for the benefit of, perhaps the entire town. But it's going to diminish our quality of life. It is likely to decrease our property values. There's going to be noise. The generators perhaps were quiet. They're brand new. Are they going to be quiet next? In the years to come? What happens as they start to degrade? I also feel, and this point has been made before, but I want to repeat it. It's called a pilot program. Well, pilot for what? To me, it's like the nose under the camel's tent. We get there, hey, look, it wasn't that bad. Well, why don't we do this a little more? I'd be willing to bet money that a few years down the road, if this goes forward, the argument will be, let's try some games there. And then it's going to be really nuts. The traffic there on Saturdays, Greg talked about his driveway being blocked in Everson Place. Mine is blocked on occasion as well. If it's not blocked, the place is packed solid when there's a football game, and I accept that. I embrace it. It's part of living in Westfield. But how far do we go? Do we continue with this imbalance? And I submit it is an imbalance, not a balance going forward. Urge you to reject this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sergio Vera. I'm with, I live in Harding Street. Yes, it's on the north side. I'm a member of the Westfield Board Soccer Association. I'm also a board member. Until Derek came up, I hadn't thought so much about it, but just like Derek, my kids no longer play soccer, but I'm still helping. I remember when my oldest, Catherine, was 6 years old, I put it in recreational, and I didn't like some of the things, just as a soccer fan, I didn't like some of the things that were being done with the game itself at that age. And somebody, one of the directors, pretty much approached me and said, you know what, if you really don't like it, then join and make some changes, right? And so I didn't join until a few years later when my daughter was playing travel. But I have to say, I continue to serve. And I continue to serve because I'm not serving a third-party outside organization. You know, I mean, I know there's a lot of reference to the Westfield Soccer Association being this external organization. It's not. It's Westfield parents who volunteer because we want the Westfield kids to have a program to play in. It's not there's no, I don't know of anybody, at least I have not been making any penny out of that in there myself, right? So I don't get paid for that. We're all volunteers, right? And I have to say that we meet on a regular basis, and these issues are never brought up lightly. They're never, you know, they talk about the issues we have discussed. We've been discussing this for 8, 9 years, the issue of fields. And we've been creative, as people say, and we really have tried to be within our means. So this is not something that has come up lightly. You guys have pretty much heard the whole rant from Peter and Steve previously. So I will just urge you to vote in favor of it. I think like the previous speakers and the previous 2 speakers mentioned, we'll find out a lot more on the pilot. I mean, we can sit here and I think there will be a lot of argument, but a lot of it will be ifs. And I think that this pilot program is something we need, and then we can discuss specifics and facts instead of just hypotheticals, which is what I believe we're doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the board, my name is Serena Vash. I am the mother of 3 children who are public school children in the town of Westfield, and I am a proud travel soccer coach for the Westfield Soccer Association. I'd like to take a minute to address some of the concerns that a variety of the people have had. I would also like to let you know that if there are any concerns that the board has going forward, I will, together with the Westfield Soccer Association, work with you to address each and every one of those concerns until you don't have them anymore. I am up here in support of this proposal. As an initial matter, this is a pilot program. What is a pilot program? Well, a pilot program is something you try to see if it works. That's what a pilot program is. And that's what we're asking you to do. Let's try this and let's see if it works. I also want to address the fact that some of the individuals have said this is WSA, they're private, they're making money. I guarantee you, as a travel coach and the time that I spend in there, I'm not making a dime. These are actually our kids going there, we're teaching them, and in a minute, I'm going to talk to you a little about my team. I appreciate that individuals who have come up here are concerned that when my daughter crosses the street, she might not cross safely, but I guarantee you that I will take care of that. Keller Stadium, we're asking that we use Keller Stadium for the reason and the purpose that it was built, for the purposes of youth soccer in this town. And you are representatives of the public of Westfield. You're the Board of Education. Your purpose and your point is to educate. And I think what's being lost here a little bit is how much our children learn when they play sports. I want to talk to you for a minute about a group of athletes, 11-year-old girls. They're called the Breakers. They are my team. They're my girls. Abby, Lindsay, Sammy, Kat, Ned, Emily, Noelle, Olivia, Taylor, Kate, Haley, Frankie, Sydney, and Katie. They're ordinary kids, they're ordinary athletes, and they have accomplished extraordinary things. For most of our kids, the game of soccer is not about making money, it's not about becoming professional athletes, it's about having role models, it's about becoming a part of a team, it's about being a competitor and a cooperator and a leader. Let me tell you some of the things that my girls learned this year. And somebody said earlier that there was a minimal benefit. Let me tell you something. My girls are what's called, for whatever it means, the D team. The team that wouldn't be if we don't have enough space. The team that won't be if we don't find more fields and if we don't get these lights and we don't have the opportunity to play. These girls, the Abbies, the Emilys, the Noels, the Olivias, will not play if there isn't enough space. These girls were on a field last year and 2 huge trees fell on them in the middle of the practice. So anybody who wants us to practice somewhere else on a grass field, why don't you come to one of our practices and watch those trees fall on our girls? They need to have a safe place to play. Keller Stadium was built for the purpose of playing sports. This is what my girls learned this year. They learned that together, they're better than any one of them alone. They learned about playing fairly. They learned how to win with grace and how to lose with dignity. They learned how to shake the ref's hand even after a bad call, and they learned how to congratulate the opponent for a well-played game. You are the Board of Education. Look at the education that these girls are getting. On the fields in this town, our daughters and our sons have the confidence to create and the courage to fail. Our kids learn how to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and get back in there and try again and again and again, and how many of us have needed that in our lifetime? On the field, my girls have learned to turn disappointment into opportunity and opportunity into success. Communication, sportsmanship, compassion, and leadership, these are lifelong lessons. They are not lessons that are learned in the classroom, they are lessons that are learned on the field. The vast majority of our student athletes will not go on to be professional athletes, but they will be CEOs, they will be doctors, lawyers, teachers, entrepreneurs, coaches, trainers, members of the Board of Education, mothers and fathers, and maybe they will be lucky enough to live in Westfield. When it comes time for you all to vote on these lights, I want you to think about the kids in this town. I want you to think about my girls, my breakers. I want you to think about every team. I want you to say, when you're sitting there thinking, well, why do we really need these fields? Why do we really need this extra space and this extra time? We need it for the ordinary kids in this town, the ordinary girls and boys of the Westfield Soccer Association, who in their lifetimes will do extraordinary things.
Thank you.
Board of Education, good evening. My name is Scott Roger. I live at 555 Washington Street. I did have a prepared statement, however, many points have been driven home already. I do not wish to reiterate. I do want to point out that while I'm sure this is a longer than normal meeting, the lights would be going off in a minute. So if it wrapped up an hour ago and you went home after our grueling meeting, I would go home to lights and noise and additional soccer practice or whatever sport it would be. I do take offense at some of the statements used by those in support of it, the increased use of the field. We try to be good neighbors. We really only want the Board of Education to be a good neighbor. That's all we're looking for. When I moved to Westfield 17 years ago, I knew where the field was. I knew where my house was. That was the house I could afford to buy to get the quality of life to live in Westfield. When the field got turfed and the use expanded, I accepted it. I accept the buses parked blocking the roadway, my driveway being blocked, the endless amount of litter that ends up after every sporting event across my front yard that I have to go out and pick up. I accept. You've never seen me here before. I've never petitioned you before. I've never bothered you before. And now we want to use the field at night. So the weekends that I used to have maybe just a football game, which now is, someone brought up PAL and every other event through the weekend, we want to take away the evenings from me too. So I really can't go to bed till after 9:40. And I realize I may look young, but sometimes I do like to go to bed before 9 o'clock. I just, it's a personal choice that occasionally I like to enjoy, which you want to take away from me, at least on a pilot program for 2 months. Someone said previously, is that the inconvenience of a few. They said, why should we negate this for the inconvenience of a few? I say it's easy for people to choose sacrifice when it's on the part of another. It's easy to do. Historically, it's been done all the time. But that's how wrongs get perpetuated. Yes, the field could expand its use. You could run it 24 hours a day. It doesn't make you a good neighbor. This meeting was canceled a week ago, and the reason it was canceled was from inclement weather. And there was snow and ice for Tuesday during the day. I got up early, and I live on the corner. I have 200 linear feet of sidewalk covered in ice. I went out there, and I chipped up the ice all the way around my house. Why? Because I'm your neighbor. And the kids that you were charged with, that we're all concerned about getting educated and cared for, have to walk by my house to get to Lincoln School, to get to Edison, to get to Tamaqua, to get to the high school. And I want to make sure they're safe. I want to make sure I'm trying to do my part as your neighbor. I'm just asking you, please, be a good neighbor. Everyone in this room has probably had a bad neighbor at some point. I've moved from bad neighbors. Do you really want to come home in the middle of the night if you had the neighbor blaring the stereo or fixing a car that's broken down in his driveway? These little things annoy you. That's your home. The Fourth Amendment says it's the most secure place to you, that even the government can't intrude in it. And now you want to take a little bit more from me. I've been given. I'm working with you. I want to help you. I want the school programs to succeed. But a temporary program, this is not your answer. You need to expand field use. The soccer association maybe needs to turf some other fields, get some expanded use somewhere else. The few have paid. We've paid our dues. Over the years, 17 years, 20 years, 22 years. Just be a respectful neighbor. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be as quick as possible because I know that everyone in this room is tired. I am a parent in Westfield. I live at 421 North Scotch Plains Avenue. And to be honest, for the people that live adjacent to, is that too loud? The people that live adjacent to Keller, I live adjacent to a park. And I have to tell you, to be very honest, I've lived there for 25 years. I have 2 kids that went through the school district. They're now in college. I have one still in the district. Whenever there was a concern and we
Excuse me,
voiced...
could you just kind of look this way, speak into the
Sorry.
microphone?
Whenever there was a concern and we voiced it to the town immediately addressed it. If there was an issue with parking, they addressed it. If there was an issue, that was really the biggest thing. There was a huge concern with parking. As a parent, I had a concern because I had 2 teenage boys who I was very concerned weren't going to be able to pull out of our driveway because people parked right up to the edge. So it was like you were trying to come out of a 4-way intersection. One time, I brought it to the attention of the town. They put yellow lines down, and it never happened again. And thank God, and this is for the people that live near the park, near Keller. The town really addresses safety concerns. They don't let it sit because they're concerns that people bring forward, and they don't let it sit. I do want to thank the Board of Ed, but I also want to thank the WSA. My oldest is now a junior in college, so if I do the math, I guess it's been 16 years that my kids have been involved in the WSA, and currently still one is. And I absolutely support the WSA, and that these are all volunteers, just like you guys are. Many people do this double duty. They work a full-time job, and then they take on this whole other project, which is really for the greater good of our kids. And I really do recognize the strain it puts on a homeowner when you live near a park, but I will talk about that in a second. I also have kids that have traveled 30 minutes because of their travel teams, in multiple different towns in the county and even out of the county to get to practices. Is it a hardship? It's more of a pain in the neck than anything, but you do what you need to do for your kids. What I will say is that Many of you may know that my mission is to keep kids engaged and to keep them healthy and to work on fitness for life, but to have them avoid the dangers of drug and alcohol and use or abuse. And one of the best ways to do that is organized sports. If you can keep your kids full and you can keep your kids focused, you keep them out of trouble, for the most part. Nothing's 100%. But I also want to say that there's a plaque sitting at McKinley School for one of our Westfield High School graduates who we lost far too soon to illness. I work in healthcare, and I really do see tragedy every day. Tragedy exists. This isn't tragedy, this is transition. This is really a happy problem from where I sit. And I have to go back to it because I would not remember what it said, but it's worth saying. I'm gonna back up just for a second. I hear the little girls screaming on the soccer fields because that's who plays behind my house, in addition to many other practices, but the ones I hear are the soccer girls because they're so tiny and their screeches are so loud. I love that sound. I think that's a great sound, and as we get older, we don't hear it enough. It's a happy noise. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to read what's written on a plaque that sits at McKinley in memory of one of our students who we lost to cancer. And it's called Megan's Garden, and it's called The Gifts of Life. Life offers gifts which are priceless: the sunset that follows the day, the crash of sea waves breaking, the laughter of children at play. Life does not ask for a thank you, for the gifts she offers are free. To have them, we need only to value the beauty in all that we see. So I support all of you. I understand your concerns, but I think there's a way to make this work for the kids in our town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Anthony Scaglione. I live on Washington Street. At first, when I heard about this, I was ambivalent about it. I have two daughters that have gone through the soccer. My son played football and lacrosse. When I first saw the house that I moved into, it was the day of a track meet. And I heard what the noise sounded like, but I bought the house anyway. There's been a big change since 1998. The field is used a lot more than it was before. And the reason why I came up here was because 2 or 3 women ago who came up here, I think it's such a bold arrogance that these beautiful noises that the kids make when they're screaming, the happy noises, are something that a very small amount of people have to deal with, and everybody else is okay with it. It's really nice of them to feel that the benefit of the town is okay when a small amount of people have to shoulder all the burden. I looked on Census website, and there are 10,566 homes in Westfield, approximately 8,199 families, 30,000 people. Around Keller Field, if you just go around the block of Keller, there are 28 homes. If you count the houses across the street, not even going down the side streets, there's 65 homes. If you assume 5 people per house, you're talking about 325 people. So some of these people think that 325 people have to burden themselves to the maximum for the benefit of our children. We all want our children to benefit. It's been beneficial to me. My kids have done well in sports in the programs, whether it was WSA, PAL, high school basketball, high school football. It just boggles my mind how somebody can get up here and say that my concerns are minimal compared to their not having to worry about it. My question would be, how would those sounds sound if we put the pilot program over at Roosevelt Field? Why don't we do that? Why don't we do something with the Elm Street field? How come nothing's ever been done with that field? What about over at Washington School and McKinley School where there are pretty nice fields? How come nothing's ever been done there? We're talking about this going back to 2002. I think it goes back further than that. And the problem is, let's take the easy way every time, because it's only 325 people. So what? What are they going to do? It's just 325 people. There's 30,000 people we need to benefit. So I guess I consider that a little bit of arrogance, and it's unfair. If you really want to do a balancing act, I think the balancing act is to try to address the real problem. Why don't people start putting up the money and get these fields turf and spread it all over the town? Why does it always have to be in one place? And now we got to worry about trees falling on fields? Come on, what is that? You know, it's nice to get all emotional about our children, because that always works, whether it's cell phone towers or whatever else. But we all want the kids to succeed, but we should all participate in that happening. And right now, there's 65 homes and 325 people. I don't know how many times I have to say that before it sinks in. Now, a bunch of questions were asked before about what does the Board of Ed have the right to do with this property with respect to going through the planning board, and none of those questions were answered. I don't know if anybody can address those answers right now, because I'd really like to hear an answer. Does the Board of Ed have to go through the planning board to make something like this happen? Do you have to get a permit?
So I can tell you, you want to address, you want me to address? I'll address it. So I can tell you how I would propose we address that issue, because it is the case that when the issue was presented, Bruce Kaufman of the Town Rec Commission was in support of it. When we talked about it in facilities, our architect was there advising us how it could be done. He's not a lawyer, though. He's familiar with land use. He's not a lawyer. My recommendation to the board would be to modify the proposal that we have with an additional point, and Dana, you'd have to tell me how to do this procedurally, that we receive confirmation before any installation of lighting that the proposal is in compliance with all applicable town regulations, and the process followed is appropriate under all applicable town regulations. Having said that, my opinion, my belief is that we have done that, and I say that from past work the Board of Ed has done with respect to lighting.
Do you need a permit?
I don't believe we need a permit.
Do you know if you need a permit?
I'm telling you my belief.
It's your belief.
Yes.
You can't vote on this unless you know.
Well, I can with what I just added.
So you would open yourself up to possibly doing something that's not within your power or your right to do unless you have a permit, if you need a permit.
Well, those are statements that I might change. Hang on. My change to this proposal would make sure that we confirm what people have said tonight. Part of the issue tonight is that, and over the past several weeks, is that people have made a lot of statements about this proposal. I don't know as I sit here whether or not they will come to fruition, whether they're true, whether they're false. I was particularly troubled by the statements made about the sound of the generators. So we had the WSA bring out a generator. As it turned, hang on.
I'll address that too, because I watched that.
Okay, you can do that, but right now, I'd like to respond to something you said. So we asked the WSA to bring out a generator. In my opinion, the sound of the generator wasn't close to the concerns that were raised by the emails. Doesn't mean there was no noise. It means that they weren't close to the concerns raised by the emails. So we looked at that. I don't know how to test this proposal and sum up everything everybody has said without actually seeing it in action. That's one of the things I'm struggling with.
Why not test it at Roosevelt Field?
It's not a turf field.
So what? Why does it have to be a turf field?
Yeah, we've gone through every field in town looking at conditions and viability. A turf field, a non-turf field can't be played on in this weather. A turf field can. I think you know that.
You won't be playing on this field either for at least another week or two.
Right.
And by that time, it'll be getting dark at 7:30.
Right, so the lights wouldn't go on until that
But
time.
back to my original question, do you need a permit?
I've answered that, and I've
No,
told
you didn't.
what
You said you don't know.
so that's the answer.
Okay, then
Okay.
what else do you want me to say?
Okay, so
But
can
that-
you
But that's
vote
not
on it?
actually what I said.
Yeah,
What I said, what is my belief that the process we followed and the things that we did are in compliance with what the town requires. I am more than happy to confirm that. I am not happy to sit here and debate with you what I've said or haven't said. I think that's pretty clear.
Okay. Now, you had the lights, you had one set of lights set up Friday night, two Fridays ago, I think it was?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you had it in the corner over by Lincoln School.
We had it where one of them, within a few feet of where one of them, I believe, is going to be positioned. That's correct.
Were the lights positioned the way they were supposed to be positioned, or you just turned it on?
They were, I could let Peter answer this, but my understanding is they put them up, not necessarily exactly how they will be positioned, because without all four of them, you can't actually fully position them. And with reflection from the snow, you couldn't exactly tell where they should be to optimize field coverage.
So then you couldn't make any evaluation based upon that test then?
Well, no, as I told you, we put the generator there because of the complaints and the comparisons we had from the noise to come from the generator with multiple home generators.
Right, that's the noise issue, but not the light issue. You can't make a determination on, even though you're not a professional.
I don't think we can make a determination about lighting until we see the lighting, where it's going to be, at the time it's going to be used, and determine what happens.
So you don't think the lights were in that position were set up the way they probably will be? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying I think they were probably close. I don't think anybody would tell you they're exact because they're not going to know. I don't think, you could ask them. I don't think they're going to know until you actually have full use of the field, 4 lights set up, and people on the field. That's my opinion.
Okay, well, sitting in my backyard, which is on Washington Street, 4 houses from the corner to Rahway, I noticed that the 2 houses on Rahway, the one right next to the field and the one next to that, were totally lit up. The
Okay.
light reflecting off their windows and lighting up my backyard.
And if that's the case, then they need to adjust the lights, and if they can't accommodate that adjustment, then they shouldn't have lights.
Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to state was that being a sports fanatic and living where I live and being a part of the WSA, as in my children playing there, there's no better group of people that I've come across when it comes to coaching and looking out for the kids. And I don't know what they were talking about with money and stuff like that, because there's no way the people who volunteer all their time are making money. I don't know what the organization does and how the other coaches get paid for private lessons and all that kind of stuff. There's probably a lot of money to be made there. So I want to make sure that it's understood that when it comes to the WSA and the people who take the time to coach, I'm all in favor of that, and I back them 100%. What I'm more concerned about is the arrogance of some people to come up here and tell me that my little problem for this pilot program for 2 months is no big deal. Because maybe what I need to do is then find out where their house is, and while the pilot program's going on here, I'm gonna do a pilot program and have my lawnmower run on their front lawn and see how they like that until 9:30. Because, maybe I'll get a certain distance away so I get the right decibel level. And by the way, in the literature, it says that for every 23 feet, the sound degrades or lessens by 6 dB. Does anybody at this table have an idea what that means?
I have a practical idea, having listened to it, yeah.
Do you know what 6 dB means?
Not in a technological sense, no.
I'm an engineer and I know what 6 dB means.
Okay.
Okay, but we can hear it. Okay, we will hear it. Okay, we hear it when people take that big truck tire and flip it over. I could hear that loud and clear. They hit it with sledgehammers for exercise. I don't know where they come up with these exercises. We hear that too. Okay, and that's not sponsored by the Board of Ed, but people are out there making noise at night too. Okay, so the people who live around this school or the field have sacrificed a lot. And I want it to be understood that no one should get up here and minimize our sacrifice for the children of this town. And that it seems like you need to do a lot of some more work before you can even know legally you can vote on this, and if it's the right way to do it. But it's about the kids, but it's also about our quality of life. Because like Scott said, Sunday mornings are gone until 12, 1 o'clock. Saturdays are mostly gone. When I come home from work early and there's a game going on, I park the car and I run around and I watch the game. I watch all the high school games if I can get there on time. I love it. That's at 4:30 to 6 o'clock. But now you're telling me that I can't go out into my backyard, probably, and listen to 60 dBA noise level of the wind blowing through the leaves on the trees. Because now that's going to be taken away from me too. So I get the privilege of hearing the noise, seeing the lights for the pilot program. What we're piloting this for, I don't know, because what we should be piloting is a grassroots effort to get all these people that are so in favor of the kids and putting up the money to fix the fields that need to be fixed and stop putting the burden on the 65 homes and the 325 people that live around Keller. I'm done.
Good evening. My name is Nuno Rodriguez. I live at 1219 Boulevard, home of the WSA's Fun of Soccer. I see thousands of little kids come through on the weekends. I'm a father of 3. I've been involved for about 5 years now, and I fully expect my other 2 kids to go through the program. It's a wonderful program. I appreciate this gentleman's comments to indicate that the WSA is not a for-profit center. We're all volunteers. A lot has been said tonight, and I was going to come up, then I was, and then I decided to come up. And it's interesting to me, having heard many of the speakers thus far, that those of us that have children currently involved in the WSA are in favor for obvious choices. And many of those folks, much like the gentleman before me that indicated that their children went through the WSA at some past time, have a different point of view. I think obviously if your kids are going through it today, you're for it. And if you had kids that were in soccer before,
Hang on.
they're in it now, wonderful.
Okay,
So-
we're not here to address each other. I just want to.
No, we're not. I'm just pointing some of the points out. So I'll be brief, and I appreciate your thoughts on that. As educators up there, Board of Ed, you're part of the education system, and I just simply ask you to look around the artwork on this building here in this room, where you can see that athletics are part of the fabric of an education for a child. And these programs very much funnel kids to the high school programs, the varsity programs, et cetera. But it's part of the fabric of this community that we've all talked about. And I don't underestimate or try to downplay the sacrifice that these folks have mentioned before. I'm certainly respectful of that. But it's part of the fabric of the entire community, and sometimes we got to carry a little bit more than others. And again, not trying to downplay where you reside and what the issues are, but this is for the greater good of the community, and I don't think we can downplay that whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vicki Mangiamelli. I live on Westfield Avenue in one of the 28 homes that directly butts up to Keller Field. And I agree with how sports are paramount in a child's development. My husband has coached intercounty soccer for the past 6 years and will again this year coach intercounty soccer. He loves it. My daughter loves it. However, this is not, to quote, a minor problem. This pilot program, it's a major problem. We bought our house full knowing that Keller Field was in our backyard, and we love having it in our backyard. We love having it in our backyard during the day. We love having it in our backyard after school. But you know what we really love is being able to put our kids to bed at a reasonable time. I don't want my 4th grader going to bed at 9:45 at night. And we can hear all that in the wintertime when the windows are closed. We hear everything. We hear the track, people shoveling the track and then running around the track. And there's not a lot of them in the wintertime doing that. Just magnify that 10 times for spring and fall. It's really a lot of noise. And after school until whenever they stop at 6 o'clock, that's fine. But it cannot happen until 9:45 every single night. And again, to ask the question, what I think we're all dying to know is, what are we piloting for? Are we piloting for permanent lights, which we all know will lead to games, and those games will take place Monday through Sunday. There will be no reprieve of noise for all of us. And yes, it will affect property value. We pay a lot to live in Westfield because we chose to live in Westfield. We chose to buy the homes that we did where they're located. But we also want the peace and quiet that comes with living in a great, for lack of better terms, urban environment. And to parrot my neighbor, nobody thinks that a lighted field should be in any residential neighborhood. It should be where there's space. So the Westfield Soccer Association is a wonderful soccer association. However, I think the money would be better spent on getting, maybe turfing Tamaulipas. Just a thought. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brian Greenspan. I live at 124 Linden Avenue in Westfield, down the street from Wilson School. I've been a resident of Westfield since 1989. I have 4 children. All of them have attended this high school. 3 of them have graduated. 1 of them is a junior, my youngest. I'm about to read something real quick, which really doesn't directly affect this discussion this evening, but I believe it's the root cause of maybe what this discussion has come from over the years. Quote, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Obviously, the people on the board might recognize that as being Title IX. That was written in 1972. Obviously, we've gone 43 years since that has been written, and this town is struggling to find field space for all the young men and women, young men, young ladies. And the young ladies that Title IX affected directly are a generation and a half grown and now have had children whose children are starting to grow and play. And the extreme demand on fields is a direct result of Title IX, which was one of the greatest things that ever happened in the United States. And it wasn't a law, it was an amendment to the Higher Education Act of 1965, obviously, which indicates that people see that something was wrong with the law of 1965 and needed to change it. Just as right now we need to find a solution to a huge problem, which has been going on in Westfield for as long as I've been here. And I have not sat on that board, and you're all volunteers, and I can respect that, and your time is incredibly valuable. Just as everybody here that came and spoke tonight is insanely well prepared and very passionate. And yes, they bought a home by the high school soccer field, and that's great. And it was a football field then, but there's ordinances, and everybody has to respect what they are, and if somebody really wants to do something different, then they need to go through the proper channels to change them. Me personally, I'm in favor of this proposal and the pilot plan, and if it can be seen that it's viable and workable for this time period, and then maybe something else could be done somewhere else later on. But obviously, as long as I've been here and I was a member of the board of the Westfield Soccer Association some years ago. This is not an issue that's going to go away tonight, no matter what you vote. It's not an issue that's going to go away from this town. There are children here. The field demands are incredible, and whatever space can be used, whatever monies can be allocated that can be used for these types of things, I don't think this is a problem. I think the problem is a blessing. We have wonderful children, and it's a wonderful sport, and I mean, the fact that the Westfield Soccer Association came up with the proposal, I find very encouraging. And the fact that you took it on is great, and if you people all live around the school, and I feel for you. I don't know how I would feel directly about it, but I know it's a beautiful game, and I know how much I enjoy to watch children play it, and it's great because it's the same for everybody. It has nothing to do with whether you're a boy or a girl. The rules are exactly the same, the laws are exactly the same, and everybody can play it. And it's a great thing, and that's why I'm in support of it, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chris Collins. I live at 453 Everson Place. That's on the corner of Everson Place and Westfield Avenue. It's directly in front of the Lincoln School, directly in front of Keeler Stadium, and right near the rear entrance to the stadium. I'm here to speak in opposition of the proposed temporary lights. The success of the Westfield Soccer Association business model should not diminish the quality of life for residents surrounding the stadium. I have two daughters. They both play soccer in the Westfield Soccer Association League. They do great work. Nobody here could benefit more than me. What's proposed is my daughters walk across the street and go to practice. But I think the cost is too great. Keeler Stadium, as we've heard, is a stadium within a neighborhood. The introduction of lights into that neighborhood will extend the stadium experience to neighboring residents well into the evening. 9:45 is not acceptable, especially to young families. My neighbor Melissa just moved in. I don't think she is here tonight. She moved in right behind me, I think a month and a half ago. She's pregnant. I took a picture I'm going to share with you later. The picture was taken from basically her family room window, which sits on top of where the baby's going to be born into. What's proposed comes with noise, period. Children gathered for anything generate noise. They need to be picked up and dropped off, and they often cause trouble in the interim. I know, I used to be that kid. And we've got a situation too where a lot of these athletes, children athletes, are going to be walking home from practice, my kids included. And as was pointed out, the streets are residentially lit. They're not designed for all these kids leaving practice going home. It's an unsafe environment. I routinely call the Westfield Police Department to report after-hour disturbances, like the throwing of rocks. Yes, I've become that guy. I was that kid, and now I've become that guy. The disturbances include throwing of rocks, idling cars with loud music in the Lincoln School parking lot, and late horseplay at the Lincoln School playground and the Beechwood Park, which is also a playground. By extending the hours of the stadium into the night, we will see an increase in these occurrences at the adjacent locations, especially when you consider that the older players in the soccer association are able to drive themselves to practice. I was that kid. I'd sit in my car forever listening to radio, not wanting to go home. I'm going to be the guy sitting there calling 789-4000, which I believe is the police number to get them over. Keller Stadium, the site is woefully unsuited for the use of temporary construction-style lights. The entire visitor side of the stadium is void of noise, light, line of sight screening. There is not one tree, shrub, sound or light barrier, natural or man-made, that exists from the edge of Lincoln School to Beechwood. The light sources themselves will be in direct line of sight to the homes, passing cars, and especially cars exiting Beechwood onto Westfield Avenue. The tennis courts at Memorial Field are better screened than this residential area. Could you guys send that up? I'm sending up to you guys to pass around. It's a picture. It shows what I just described. And it's taken from my neighbor's
Thank you.
family room vantage point. The presence of these lights, the daily setup and takedown, the fueling and maintenance required regardless of promised frequency is more illustrative of a construction site than a neighborhood field. I was present for the demonstration the other night, the demonstration of a single unit. I saw and I heard the activity and I walked over to observe. I applaud the board's efforts to understand the proposed lighting, but I found the test inadequate and unscientific. A lot of the points I was going to make have already been made. I was standing with the board president at the edge of my driveway when one of the demonstrated light masts was raised or lowered, and the noise was obvious to both of us. Rich commented on it to me. If you remember, I had a pizza in the car and had to get going.
I remember the pizza. And that is an accurate comment. What we heard was the
ratcheting.
Right, of up and down, which they could address. I don't know if that actually happens during the night, but they could address that.
Well, these masts need to be raised and lowered daily, times 4. Thus hundreds of times over the course of this proposed time frame, this pilot. Again, this activity and equipment is more likely to be found on a construction site than a neighborhood field. In closing, sundown needs to mean something. It's a universal understanding that the day is done. Dinner, homework, and bedtime should commence. Instead, it is proposed that these lights be hoisted, generators fired up, and a parade of traffic and noise commence. The field activity continue for another 2+ hours into the night. This should be a time of repose for residents, all residents, young and old. The home setting is as important to the development and education of our children as the teachers and books they use. It is imperative that the Board of Education understand that and demonstrate their understanding when it comes to voting on these lights. The question before the board is not whether you thought that one unit, as inadequate as we've discussed, was too loud, but rather if extending the stadium atmosphere into the evening hours is appropriate given the site deficiencies, lack of sound and light measurement studies, and overall discord of the neighborhood that you are a part of and that you represent as public servants. Your action will reflect the value you put on the home life for all residents, especially those with young families who start bedtime hours before the proposed shutdown of these lights, and the final departure of all of its participants. I'm going to leave you with one other picture. I made this quickly when we were standing together, Rich, with my iPhone. It shows obvious light spill, as one of my neighbors attested to that evening. You can see the homes on Rahway, the eaves of the house are lit up. If you look to the right side of that frame, you're going to see light spilling into the neighbors in the backyards of those houses, illuminating the house. This picture was taken February 27th when you guys were all there for the demonstration. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I hope you'll do the right thing. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Peter Franks. I'm 518 Clark Street, Westfield, close to Roosevelt School, close to Clark Park. I'm the author of that proposal, so I know a lot about it. I wrote down a lot of the questions that you folks brought up. If the board has any questions, as I said earlier, I could answer. You haven't asked yet, but that's fine. I'm up here as a resident of the town. I moved here in 1988. My 3 children have played soccer. 2 of my children played at the high school level. My youngest child runs track at the high school. I'm responsible for a lot of things that we've done that are good things in the soccer association. I'm not responsible for any bad things, so we haven't done it yet. Don't plan on it either, by the way. I've been part of the WSA for 19 years. I've been on the board for about 15 years. And yeah, me too. My kids don't play soccer anymore. I'm still doing it though. Not giving up yet. First point I want to make out, I don't see that picture, but I was there on Friday night. Cold as hell. Those lights were reflecting down on a foot of snow and ice. So when they reflect down on a green turf, it'll be a little bit different. There are 4 stanchions proposed. Each one has 4 light bulbs on it. Each light is directional, can be made to be directional. So with that said, when we have them up, we'll be able to tweak it so that they are facing into the field, away from homes, down on the green turf. Not green grass. There is no green grass in Westfield, unless just on your lawn, not on the playing fields. Why don't we use Roosevelt, Tomaquis, Echo Lake Park in some other town, whatever. The other towns aren't ours. We can't do that. Can't play on a grass field until April 1st, and this year probably not until April 15th or 20th with all the melt. You can play on an all-weather surface. That's why they put them in, called all-weather surfaces. Somebody brought up the fact that it cost $1.39 million in 2005 to put that turf field in. What we're asking, of course, is to share that facility as we, people in the town, share other facilities with the Board of Ed, and the Board of Ed shares facilities with the town, i.e. the tennis courts, tennis team. Tennis courts are being resurfaced, and the tennis team is going to go over to the Memorial Pool area. There's a lot of shared utility, and this is one piece. Although we've been trying for many, many years to find other alternatives, right now our backs are up against the wall because there is no other alternative. I've been working for 10 years with other towns trying to get some of their turf facilities. I did get one field at night starting at 9 o'clock in Summit. It's a small field, about the size of this room, maybe less. Starts at 9. One field, it'll fit one team. We have multiple teams that need to be fixed, a place to play. On February 12th, we lost the remaining 3 hours of time that we have on Thursday nights down at Houlihan Sid Fay to practice. So effectively on one field, we've lost 100% of our springtime usage. On the other field, the small field, we have 3 hours in March and 6 hours total in April and May. Just not enough to run parts of our program. Our program in the spring is much smaller than it is in the fall. In the fall, you'll know that all the little kids over at Memorial Pool, 6 years old, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. That's mostly the in-town stuff, the fun stuff. The travel stuff is a year-long commitment for these kids. They play in the spring and in the fall. In the springtime, the high school kids that can't play soccer in the fall because leagues don't exist, because high school is actually playing soccer then, they come on board. There's about 300 kids. Intercounty has 3 or 4 teams. Travel has 3 or 4 teams. FC has 5 teams. It's all part of WSA. So, to speak to some of the things that were brought up earlier, one thing I want to read is from Bruce Kaufman, the director of Westfield Recreation. As a follow-up to information I spoke about at the board meeting, that was last board meeting, when installation of lights at Houlihan Sid Fay was proposed, they were concerned about the impact on the neighborhood, undesirable individuals hanging out, drinking, drugs, congestion, etc., the usual. The lights have been in operation since 2005. I have not received one complaint about any of these issues. The lights at the complex are on from sunset till 9:45, 7 days a week, throughout the winter as well when there's no snow cover. By the way, the proposal that we made was for the lights for practice to end at 9:30, not 9:45. We'll get the lights off by 9:40, leaving one light on until 9:40 so people can egress out of the field to cross the street to go to their waiting pickup point. There's never been an accident at Houlihan Sid Fay. 7 days a week, 8 o'clock in the morning to 9:45 at night. There's never been an accident. And many, 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 many more children show up there each day, whether it be for games, practices, lacrosse, soccer, rugby, whatever's going on down there. There's not an accident. Parking, not an issue. Houlihan Sid Fay is about 1/5 the size of Edison parking lot. However, nobody's going to be parking. People drop off their kids. The coaches will park. If there are 3 teams in the field, there'll be 3 cars for coaches. There's a parent at a practice, at all practices, even for 18 years old. We want to make sure that they're covered, that the coach is covered. You probably do it in a classroom. You don't want to have a teacher by themselves in some, after-school environment, whatever it is. We don't want we trust our coaches, don't get me wrong. But we have a parent at a practice. If somebody gets hurt, the parent can take care of it so the coach can coach. These same people are very responsible for their children. They'll probably help them across the street, although most of the kids that we're talking about using Keller are going to be about 13 to 17 years old. We prefer the kids don't drive to their own practices. We've said that for years. Not a lot of kids do. I know a lot of kids that don't want to do that. They're not allowed to have multiple kids in the car anyway. Their parents prefer to drop them off. Parking's not an issue. But as I said, the lights are multi-directional. That's one of the things I wrote down. We are a non-profit 501(c) corporation. I repeat, we are a non-profit. I put in my 19 hours. I've taken several days off of this proposal from work. I don't get paid. And when I take off from work, I don't get paid from them either. Somebody mentioned the towers. If they were taller, they'd come down on the field instead of facing out. As I said, they're multi-directional. They can be face down. They're going to light up a space to practice. We need the practice space. If you prefer an 80-foot tower, I'll see if I can get one. We don't have any sponsors. We're all volunteers. Nobody pays us to run our program. The town actually, people, when they register their kids, some people do donate because they don't have time to take care of the kids themselves. There'll be no games. Everybody's talking about these loudspeakers. Gosh darn it. They're locked. We can't get in there. As I said, there'll be no games. There'll be practices. Somebody had mentioned, how many teams, a lot of changeover. Well, as it is, if we can start at 7 and end at 9:30, we'd be reducing our practice time to 1.25 hours per session as opposed to 1.5, which is, already a give. But granted, it's better than no practice at all. And there will be no practice at all for some of these teams if we can't come up with this proposal. As I said, February 12th, we lost another 3 hours. Those 3 hours would have been 6 teams training overall on a Thursday night. So if you have 2 to 3 teams down there, by the way, Keller Field is about twice the size of the area down at Houlihan Sid Fay. I estimate it to be about 10,000 square yards as opposed to 5,800 square yards at Houlihan, not Houlihan and Sid Fay. So if we had 2 to 3 teams out there, 16 kids a team, you're talking about having 38 kids out there for one session. They leave, the other kids come on. They're dropped off, they're picked up, they're gone. When the lights go off at Houlihan Sid Fay, it gets very, very dark very, very fast. And by the time that last light goes off, the cars are already gone. Parents want to get their kids home. We want to get them out of your hair. We get it. There is some noise. It's noise. I live next to Roosevelt. It's noise. Cars go down my block. It's noise. Garbage man comes in the morning. It's noise. Noise, noise, noise. I get it. However, it's not OSHA saying this is too much noise, you can't live here. We all live in the same environment. If you lived above one of the restaurants in town in an apartment, there'd be even more noise. If you live out by, I don't know, what's the most desolate spot in Westfield, probably out, even as you get towards Route 22, you hear Route 22. But if you're gonna live out in that area, it's usually pretty quiet, except for the noise on Route 22. Can't stop that. I can tell you this though, there'll be no games, there'll be no whistles. There'll be no fine for a coach who yells at a kid. We'll just fire him because we don't want him yelling at kids. All right? Again, I'm impassioned about this. For good reason. For some of you folks that don't want this to happen, I understand that too, but yet you say we do a good job. Well, we do a good job. Our program isn't any bigger now than it was 10 years ago. It's about, as a matter of fact, over some points we're a little bit less. But it's still, we don't put a gun to people's heads to be, a soccer player. They come, we try to house them. We've done an unbelievable job so far. We are at the tipping point. We have nowhere else to go. There is a asset in town that is underutilized. It's an all-weather field, and we'd like to be able to use it. That's the bottom line. That's the proposal I gave you. I thank you so much for accepting the proposal, bringing it to the public to talk about it as well. We really appreciate that. Gosh, I wish I did it 10 years ago. But we are at that tipping point. I continue to strive to work with other towns to use their fields. We're talking about Monday to Friday, sharing it with lacrosse as they need, or I should say, as the need comes, right? Yeah, sure, and we're into March 10th now. Daylight savings time is in effect, but I was on the 6:05 train out of New York today. I looked out my window at 6:10, it was pretty dark and lousy. It was raining, cloudy. You know, sure, June, it's light to 8:30. We'll be done. We're not gonna be there in June. We're asking for 10 weeks from the start of inception. You know, if it's approved and the lights go up, we can start the practice. We wanna try it for 10 weeks. Somebody talked about who's gonna be the monitor. Well, that's for the Board of Ed to decide who's gonna monitor the success of the program. The bullet points are the bullet points. The decibel levels are the decibel levels. Ironically, that they were talking about the band at 81 decibels. Well, 81 decibels is where OSHA takes over and starts to talk about sound levels for safety reasons. They don't talk about it at 71, and it gets lesser and less. And I didn't take out a tape measure, but I did a little calculation looking at the overhead from Google. And the houses are, although I understand that you can hear things, I get that. I hear it too. But as far as, you know, added noise, some of the houses are 200 feet away from where the generators will be placed. Somebody mentioned about whether or not they're new. They're new now. Well, we're not buying the generators, we're renting them. They're gonna send us the brand new generators. And if I rent them again somewhere else in the future, I'll get brand new ones again. We don't own them. They are rented. Somebody mentioned putting this money into somewhere else and building a turf field. Love to. Give me a spot. But this program isn't a $1 million program. It's a $5,000 program. It's a trial period. That's all it is. It's a trial period. As you would say to your kids, they say to you, I'm not eating the peas. All you have to do is try them. I'm not asking you to love them. You got to try it. Unless you try, you'll never know.
Hang on.
I just, while you're up there, I want to see if the board and then the public have any questions specifically for you as it relates to the WSA. I have one question. If I'm a local resident to Keeler and I believe that the lights are shining on my property at 9 o'clock at night, what do I do?
Give me a call. I'll come down there if I'm not there already, and I'll try to turn them down even further. I'm not sure what the answer is. I won't know that until we see it without snow. I'm told that when they used the lights a couple of years ago, or I'm sorry, last fall, that the lights that were shining from the Lincoln school site going out to Rahway didn't make it that far. That's what I'm told.
And in terms of the initial setup, who's doing that?
Well, when the lights, again, if approved, the lights will be delivered. I'll be with Mike Morris and the company that delivers them. They'll show us how to use them again. And I actually took the tower down myself while we were there that last Friday night, and I turned the lights in more. When I did set them up the first time, I put them in all different directions to see. But obviously the snow had an effect as well. But then I tilted them in. So I figured what time, clearly as it gets darker out, it looks nicer as far as the usable space, and it wasn't reflecting back. But yeah, they'll come and help us set up the lights, and we will wait for it to get dark and position them.
So let's say you do that on day 1. By day 10, I mean, are these things fixed? Like, they can't be rotated?
No, they can be rotated. They can be rotated, you know.
Well, can they be rotated by vibration? Can they, like, who's checking the settings, I guess, daily to make sure?
Once they're set up to a suitable situation, they're you know, I did one myself. I've never touched it before, but you know, you swivel it and then you twist it and it's tight again. There was a comment that these will be trucked in and out every day. That's not my understanding. No, not at all. They'll be brought in, and they'll be set up, and they'll be chained to the bleacher so that they can't be stolen. Insurance, by the way, is for theft and vandalism.
And what about cranking the lights up and down every day? Does that occur?
It can occur or not. I would think that it would be probably a better situation to crank them down each night. And I say crank, I mean, I did it. I didn't really notice the sound, but I used to do it with my boat. They can be brought down every night, or they can be, they could stay up, but, you get a stormy night with wind. Why leave them up when they can come down so easily?
Does anyone on the board have questions for Peter? Is anybody in the audience? Let's do this the same way. Peter, why don't you just let others take the microphone, and you can jump back in as they ask questions. Gretchen, go ahead.
Just one question. When you originally brought this to the Facilities Committee and we talked about a start date and an end date, and it happened to be a 10-week period, if this proposal passes, it's very likely that the inception date will be beyond what you originally envisioned as the beginning date. So rather than it being a 10-week period, can we just have an end date that was the original date that you proposed? Rather than, let's say we start this in 2 weeks, I don't want it to be 10 weeks from that if the original end date, which was necessary given lighting and everything, was a date certain.
Yeah, because what happened there? There we go. I mean, I assume so. We were willing to end it 10 weeks after the start date on March 1st. Because, again, we don't want to be a burden. We want to be a test platform, right? There's still snow in the field. I don't know. I didn't go by today. But, it seems to be melting, getting there. Our season started last week. Not a lot of play, obviously. Certainly not here in town. Maybe other places. But, yeah, if that becomes a condition of the proposal and that's the way that you want it, well, we'll accept that. We'd love to see it go for 10 weeks, though, to give it that, eat all the peas.
Thank you. Please, again, just remember to state your name, address, and address your questions to the board.
Greg Casco, 434 Everson Place. Mr. Franks it is? Yeah. Two questions I have for Mr. Franks. When I was at the meeting, the last Board of Ed meeting, he said that he would be willing to transport the trailers off-site to have them fueled. Now they're going to be chaining them to the bleachers and fueling them on-site. That's a concern of mine. Secondly... No, let's take them one at a time. I don't believe that's true, nor is that permitted. Could we let Peter reply to that?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. They're going to be changed so they can't be stolen. They're not going to be changed so they can't be moved to be fueled up. There's a 30-gallon diesel tank that's incorporated inside the housing, which is going to be locked. They run for 70 to 80 hours before needing to be refueled. When you open up the machine to turn it on, you can see the fuel level. It's got a fuel gauge. So when they do need to be refueled, if we run that many hours, instead of cutting it short, they will be unchained, because we'll have a key to it. Actually, Mike Morris will have the key, the facilities director for the high school. And we will hook them up to a trailer and take them into town, fill them back up with diesel, and bring them back and set them back up again, just the way they were.
Would that be more than once or twice in a 10-week period?
I think it would, if it was a full 10-week period, I think it would only be once. As I said, they run for 80 hours. I think they said 70 to 80 hours. Oh, okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
60 to 70.
Okay, Greg?
Thank you. My concern, being in the engineering field now, I'm very familiar with DEP regulations, and if they are to be filled up on site on a Board of Ed field, I think there would be some issues with regards to a tank. He's going to take them off site, so be it. Second question, has the WSA looked into the legal aspects of their proposal with regards to the violations of several land use ordinances that are on the books now?
We're a volunteer corporation. We have some lawyers within our organization. I wouldn't ask them to speculate on the land use. However, when I did speak to the Facilities Committee of the Board of Ed and with the Town Recreation Commission, I was led to believe, I shouldn't say led to believe, under the assumption that since the first lighted proposal for lighted turf field at the high school facility was at least approved by the Board of Ed to go to vote for a bond issue, that they had done their due diligence on that same lighting. Town Commission, Recreation Commission said that they did the same work with Houlihan Fay. It is a residential area, and that there is no ordinance, at least, against having lights on till 9:30 or 9:45 at night. And we can do this in our backyards, I think, but my backyard's not big enough, otherwise I would.
I just want to check on some math. You mentioned there would be potentially 3 teams of about 18 kids per team?
I said 16, actually.
16?
It varies.
So 16, 3 teams, you said that was 32, but I actually think that's closer to 60 kids, right?
I said 38.
38. 16 times 3 is, it's not 38.
Yeah, no ratio.
If the number is 48, and is there time between the 2 practices? Like, does one end at 8 and the next one starts at 8:15? Or do they stop and start at the same minute?
At the same minute?
At the same minute. So I just want to, again, check my math. So 48 and 48 is 56, is 96, right? So 96 cars. To Sid, Fay, and Houlihan, you said they don't have car accidents, but they do have a parking lot, right? Does Edison have a parking lot?
So let's.
So everyone carpools.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Hang on. Comments will only be made from the podium. Everybody will be allowed to talk, but you talk one at a
Sid,
time.
Fay-
Hang on.
okay,
From the podium to the board. Thank you.
So Sid, Fay, and Houlihan, they have a parking lot? And Keeler does not have a parking lot? That's a big difference. About 100 cars, and they're gonna drop off in the parking lot, pull in, park, and like this young lady, the other young lady is gonna walk all the kids, all 96 of them, back and forth? Because there's no light there. Has the WSA tried this out a little bit? At all? I know you're passionate about the kids, so I'm just wondering, how far does that go? Can you answer that question? Have you tried walking back and forth from the parking lot at Edison to the field at 9:45 p.m.? Sure.
Okay. Yeah, Houlihan Sid Fay has a parking lot, pretty small. Edison lot would be used for people to come pick up their kids. We don't send them out one at a time in like recon. Team's done, team can gather, team can cross the street, get in the parents' cars and go home. I usually carpools. I know that my family always did it. I know that many families in town do it. Not everybody needs to be down there at the same time. We recommend carpools. No matter where we're going, that would be the answer. Yeah, kids are walking back and forth that facility all the time. In the afternoon, later into the afternoon, near dusk, probably at dark too. And now I believe that Mike Morris said they have a new light in front of the field house. It's not a street light, but it's a light for that area. I think Sandy mentioned at one time there was flashing lights put in in that red brick crossway for safety reasons, but apparently it was taken out for some reason. I don't know why. Safety first kind of thing. But like I said, there's never been an accident at Houlihan Sid Fay.
There's been an accident on
Hang on.
Field Avenue.
All right. The entry point is on Rahway Avenue to the large gate over to the parking lot.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question about something I think I heard you say. I think you said that the size of the program now is about the same as the size it was 10 years ago, and some parts are a little smaller. Well, why are we at a tipping point now? I mean, why weren't you out of space 10 years ago? Why is it urgent now, but it wasn't urgent 10 years ago?
It was urgent 10 years ago as well. We've been out of space, but with spring programs, some of the spring programs being larger and larger, we have less of an allocation of space. And as I mentioned to you that on February 12th, I believe it was February 12th, 10th, 12th, the Westfield Soccer Association lost another 3 hours of time at Houlihan Sid Fe on just one night a week, Thursday night. We only had it on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now we no longer have Houlihan, the bigger field, on Thursdays, which makes it that's the tipping point. It's always been a pressure-filled situation to try to get our teams out. We have all professional trainers for our teams, at least on the travel side, and on the IC side as well. They travel, they practice in a big group. However, we start at 3:30, and we work through till 9:30 on the nights that we can go to 9:30, which are fewer and far between now. And other programs, i.e. the lacrosse program, they start at about 6:30 because they are parent coached, so they compress a lot of their time into that 6:30 to 9:30 space. We're lucky enough that we have access to the fields prior to that, but we don't have enough access at night for the older kids to get out there and play, to try to non-conflict with other areas of their life, i.e. high school sports, high school activities, life in general.
I just have one quick question. What is the future goal of this pilot program?
I know in my mind, the future goal of the pilot program is to help be a catalyst to help the town realize that A, we can all survive with more turf lighted fields, and B, that the recreation department also makes an effort to put in another facility in town. Where there are already lights, maybe over at Tamacas Park. Obviously, they can't make Houlihan Sid Fe footprint any bigger, but putting lights or temporary lights on a grass field is inadequate. We have a turf facility that's already in town besides Houlihan Sid Fe that's underutilized, and it's an all-weather situation, all-weather field, which is why we need to use it now. And as I said earlier about shared utilities, and yeah, to me, the goal is to show that the lighting and the noise and the traffic is all very manageable, as it has been at Houlihan Sid Fe for the past 10 years, without incident or complaint, and that this will help be a catalyst to do that in the future for other spaces. It's very, very expensive, no doubt. This is a no cost to the Board of Ed, and it's very low cost and extremely valuable to us to rent the lights for 10 weeks to give it a trial shot.
Just to add to that, from the Board of Ed perspective, and having sat in the Facilities Committee and then the recent board meeting, there were a few points. So one was to see if high school athletes actually benefit. One was to see if soccer and lacrosse actually benefit. One was to see if this could actually be done without creating a nuisance in the neighborhood. That's why we call it a trial. It was never intended to be a precursor to permanent lighting at Keeler. That's a $300,000 to $500,000 undertaking, and in no way, in my mind at least, would putting up 4 generators that are sufficient for practice but insufficient for games be any kind of a proxy to determine whether permanent lighting could be put in that location. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Willard Shee. I have 2 daughters in the WSA. I'm happy that one of my daughters was mentioned by name today by her coach, so she'll get a big kick out of that. I have 2 questions, and the second may have already been lightly touched on. In terms of the pilot, what does the WSA propose to evaluate as factors in terms of whether the pilot is successful or not? Or what does the board propose to evaluate in terms of the factors as to whether the pilot will be successful or not? And if the pilot is successful, then what steps are being contemplated for the future?
The measure of success for us, from our perspective, obviously, is to get the kids out to be able to practice at night, do it safely, do it economically, and continue on with our program as we have. And with this new stress that we have by not having certain times and an asset and an idea to use the asset, the success would be if we do what we said we did. Provide non-nuisance, marginal nuisance, I don't know what word you want to use, but low cost to us, no cost to the Board of Ed, a lighting of the field that is very, very manageable, noise levels that are manageable, and a safe environment for our kids to play soccer or lacrosse for 10 weeks in the springtime. Again, spring is the real focus for us. The measure of success for the board, I can't answer to that. That's the board's measure, which we spoke about when I first met with them. How do you measure success? Ginny asked me that question. How do we measure success? So we have some ideas. From my perspective, is getting our kids out there practicing, keeping them on the fields, and doing it in a safe way that people see as being a value to the town, a value to the clubs, and a value to the neighborhood. Other measures would have to come from the board to us and have them evaluated.
Hi, I'm Kurt Van Anglen. I live at 519 Washington Street in Westfield. Been there for 39 years. And I have the privilege of looking at the garbage dump behind the garage at Lincoln School, the hot dog stand at the rec field. Very rarely will we complain to the Board of Ed about it, but occasionally we do. So I've heard a lot of talk from people in WSA saying they need the residents to be tolerant, just for a little while. I've been tolerant for 39 years. There have been trials with lighting before. We have fought this lighting before. We did not fight last year when the Board of Ed wanted temporary lighting to support the Westfield High School football team to get a couple of hours for practice so they could go on to perhaps the state competition. I don't think anybody from our neighborhood fought that at all. This one, I think you're going to find out, 65 residences, 325 people will stand together and we will fight this thing, and it will not happen in our backyard.
Hi, my name is Charlie Milazzo. I live at 450 Beechwood Place, right? And I had a speech here set up, but everybody covered it. I think the real thing that's bothering everybody is, what does this pilot really mean? Why do you use the term pilot? That's really not clear. What are you using for metrics to measure the effect on the neighborhood? How do you measure the quality of life, the depreciation of it? Really, I think you have to think about that. Also, you have to think about the legal ramifications. My wife is very sick tonight. She's a lawyer, and she wanted to be here to educate you. Thank you. Could you tell me how you measure the quality of life?
Sure. So
Tell me.
Sorry. So let me go back one person to a comment. You said you've been tolerant for 39 years.
I haven't.
No, I know it's combined with the prior comment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the Board of Ed is asking anyone to be tolerant. I think we're asking to understand the facts and the impact that this situation will have on local residents. You're asking how we measure success. We need to see what this project does. If this project spills lights onto your property and windows, it's not a success. If this project keeps you awake at night, it's not a success.
Yeah, but how do you measure that? Do you come to do you come to every house and survey every house to see the effect upon it? Tell me how you're going to find that information out. How?
Well, I think there's two thoughts. One is, it is subjective, so everybody's going to have a different opinion.
Well,
But at the same-
subjectivity isn't going to help. You said you're going to
Right, so
measure it.
I'm trying to finish. So at the same time, yes, if residents are complaining that the lights are spilling on their property, in my mind, that's pretty easy to determine. You go and you look. If residents are saying that the noise is inside their home, if they'll let us come in, that's pretty easy to check.
That's fine.
It is or it isn't.
Who do we contact to check?
Right.
You?
People do that, but what I would propose is we have one point of contact, and Dana will have to decide who it is if we haven't already, whether it's Sandy or you or somebody in the administration that knows how to contact all of us immediately.
Okay.
So you're saying you're going to set up someone that we can contact when the lights are on at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and we're disturbed, and they'll come to our house and measure the sound,
Well, or the light, yes.
and measure the sound alike. Could you please provide the name of that person with their cell phone?
We could certainly give that before this starts, yeah, and we'll figure out
Okay.
who the right person is.
Thank you. If you can tell everybody in the neighborhood who that person is, you know, publish it in the Westfield
website.
Leader. Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Before it starts or if it starts?
Either way.
Okay, you said before.
Okay,
And-
well, I think, okay,
And-
but I
and-
think we all know why we're here talking about it, so that kind of comment from the floor isn't appropriate. You're welcome to use the microphone. Thank you.
Well, I'm pretty much the same point as he had. You started out your response to Charlie Milazzo here by saying what the board is asking, what the board wants, what the board's going to do. And that makes me wonder, man, have you already made up your mind? If you're saying that's what the board is asking, isn't it what the WSA is asking? Why did you say it's what the board is asking?
Sure, so if I'm not being specific in who made this proposal, I think it's quite clear, and it's written on the paper. It is the WSA coming to the board, making a proposal. If somebody wants to make a big deal out of the fact that I said board instead of WSA, I apologize for that, but it's not really something to make a big deal out of. If I had made up my mind about this, I wouldn't have spent time in the neighborhood. I wouldn't have asked the WSA to put up lights. I wouldn't have stayed here 3 hours tonight. I think every one of you who's come to talk about your neighborhood and the town have very valid points. I think to try and make a big deal out of a comment like that is inappropriate and just out of context. You have the mic, sir.
Thank you. Scott Roger, 555 Washington Street, Westfield. I have a few questions for Mr. Franks. Mr. Franks stated in his rebuttal to the questions by neighbors that there has never been an accident at Sid Fay Houlihan.
I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard, can you guys hear him?
I can be very loud.
Just maybe move a little closer to the mic or
Sure.
point toward you a little.
In Mr. Franks' rebuttal, he stated that there has never been an accident at Sid Fay Houlihan Field in the duration of time that it's been turfed and lighted. My first question to Mr. Franks would be, did he contact the Westfield Police Department Records Bureau and get a copy of all the statistics from the police department in regards to accidents at those intersections over that time frame? Are you quoting fact? Do you have facts to support that? Oh, one more time then. You stated there has never been an accident at Sid Fay Houlihan. My question to you is, did you contact the police department for that time frame and get the statistics for any traffic accidents that have occurred in that area?
I have not contacted the police department. However, I've been down at that field for almost every Saturday and Sunday for the past 15 years. To my knowledge, there's never been an accident.
So that was not fact. That was his opinion. You then stated there has never been a parking issue at Sid Fay Houlihan Field in the duration you've been there. And I'll say it again. Did you contact the Westfield Police Department and get statistics from them in regards to parking violations in that area for the duration of time?
I never said there was never a parking issue
You
at
said
Houlihan
there
Sid
has
Fay. I
never
said there's a
been
parking lot there.
Parking issue. Those are your words. You said there has never been a parking issue. I used to work for the Westfield Police Department for 28 years. I ran our records bureau. That information is readily accessible. Apparently, no one's made any attempt to research this to determine some fact. That's what we're looking for is fact. Mr. Franks came up here and gave his opinions, and just shot down everything these residents have brought you in fact. As, oh, well, and we'll see. We've given you fact. None of this is fact. Other than the fact that you do need a place to practice, and we appreciate that. We're just not looking forward to impact our quality of life. You stated that you could easily set up one of these lights. Will there be a team of people there, because these are diesel generators, correct? To deploy the diesel generators to make sure they're set up correctly?
The Able Rents company that we're renting the units from will come and help us set up, give us a tutorial, along with the staff at the high school, the facility staff, since they will be the ones to use the units prior to our arrival, and we'll be the ones to shut them down at night. So we'll all get a tutorial on how to use them, and we'll have as Ginny had mentioned, we'll have a work, if approved, we'll have a labor profile for the people that will be there volunteering to do the work.
So the translation of that is no. There will be no one who's professionally trained, who's ever deployed these lights before. You will have them come out and give you a display or a preview of the equipment, but they will not be on site when the equipment is used and deployed, correct?
The rental company didn't say that we needed to be licensed to turn them on and off.
I did not necessarily mean licensed, but trained. There's no one trained to the use of deployment.
They're going to give us a tutorial.
Yes, okay. So there's no one familiar with the use and running of a diesel engine, the exhaust capacities, the heat, the tipping factor of the lights once hoisted in a prevailing wind. There's nobody on site for that, to deal with that.
The light stanchions wouldn't be rented to us if we weren't able to operate them. They have outriggers that, I say outriggers, I don't know the technical term, but they have adjustable arms that will go down and stabilize it. Again, they'll be brought down at night. And in addition to that, I had planned on putting a line down to a fixed area to hold that light down in case there was an errant prevailing wind.
Having used temporary emergency lighting in the field, I can tell you that it takes some expertise to get it deployed properly, use it frequently. And there is a tipping hazard if left up, because initially you did say, oh, they could be left up, or we could put them down depending. And you did say in the beginning of your statement that ideally you would leave them up. They're never left up in storage because they tip constantly. It's a top-heavy device. It's not a question. You can hold on a second. You also stated that you've operated Sidfay Houlihan Field without incident or complaint in the time period that it's been in operation, turfed and lighted. Do you have any facts to support that? Because I know that there was an entire petition by the neighborhood there about the lights.
I read a statement from Bruce Kaufman from the Recreation Department, the people who operate the field, and that's what I stated. I read his note.
So no, there's no fact.
That is what.
Okay, I'm good.
We had Mr. Kaufman come to our last board meeting, and that is actually what he said. Personally, I don't know that I'm as persuaded by positive statements about Sidfay Houlihan. That's not where this is being taken or conducted.
I understand. I know Bruce Kaufman. I worked with him for years, and he's not in charge of the police department. He has no access to the statistics. So no one sought
I don't
that
know what he
information.
has or doesn't have, but okay.
Okay. So there's no fact to support it.
Okay.
Again, Kurt Van Anglin, 519 Washington Street, Westfield. I believe I've heard you, sir, say, and I think I've also heard this gentleman say, that this lighting, this pilot program, there is absolutely no cost to Westfield Board of Education. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, and that's my belief, and there won't be anything paid for by the Board of Ed. One indirect cost that we did mention was to the extent there's wear and tear on the field by non-Westfield High School athletes. Somebody could say that's an indirect cost of this program.
Okay, can I bring to your attention, sir, in your posted minutes for tonight, under facilities on page 2?
Yep.
The units will be turned on at dusk by Westfield High School staff.
Right.
And the staff is going to hold the keys.
Right.
Okay? Is that not a cost from the Board of Education for Westfield staff to do this? And furthermore,
Well, you want me to answer that?
I'll give you a second.
Okay.
When Westfield staff is now involved in this, what is your risk exposure which exposes the town of Westfield Board of Education?
Sure. So Westfield staff is very much involved in this because it's benefiting Westfield High School students. So to the extent Mike Morris, the head of maintenance, has a key, if there's an indirect cost to that, okay. There's not an incremental cost to that. To the extent there are additional insurance implications, I believe we asked Dana that at the last meeting, and we are either covered or will be covered with a rider, but I think you said we're covered. You could clarify. Okay. She did say publicly we are covered. Yes, there are indirect costs to Westfield High School students using the field. We want them using the field.
Well, then you shouldn't misstate in front of a public meeting that there's no expense to the Board of Education.
Okay, so I will apologize that I didn't specifically say Mike Morris is holding keys to the field and somehow there's an indirect cost to that. I don't believe there is actually. I don't believe there's an incremental cost. I believe you know that because it's written in the agenda. And again, if that's the kind of point we're making now, I don't think it's necessary.
Rebuttal, sir. If
There's no need
these
to
lights
rebut.
are being turned on after the end of the school day, and they're being shut down at 9:30 at night, are these custodial staff working overtime?
No.
Would you just have people out of the good graces of their heart stay on after work to hold keys and turn machines on and off?
Not after work. You could address it, but go ahead.
Well, I believe the intent is for our coaches who will be there with our high school kids will be turning the lights on, and WASA people will be turning the lights off. So our custodians will not be there.
Okay,
after
so
hours.
we can keep an eye on that because we're close enough to it. Okay?
Hi, Anthony Scaglione again, 543 Washington Street. When we're talking about Westfield High School students, we're talking about high school students on Westfield High School teams, not Westfield High School students playing on WSA teams.
No.
We're talking about the high school teams.
Yes.
Correct.
So it's getting dark, it's 7 o'clock now. Are we concerned about when it's raining or cloudy that the lights are gonna have to be on? What time, they get off, they're gonna go until 7 o'clock, high school students?
I can have Sandy get up and talk about the benefits to high school students and give you the details.
Okay, we'd probably wanna hear that because I think it's gonna be light. It's not gonna affect the high school students
Right,
that
so
play those sports.
Sandy is on the list to talk.
Okay.
This was supposed to be questions for Peter while he was standing there.
Well,
If we want to move over to Sandy, we can do that.
We can do that, and, okay.
Thank you.
I just got one question.
Yeah, this was intended to be questions for Westfield Soccer Association. Go ahead.
My name is Charlie Milazzo again, 450 Beechwood Place. You have these lights, okay? But also, correct me if I'm wrong, the diesel fuel is within the bottom of the light. Is that correct?
It's in the middle powder.
It's in the metal powder. At times, children go over the fence and they're in the stadium, teenagers. They can topple the light. They also smoke. They throw cigarette butts around. Is there any danger of that going up and causing a fire? And could they break into where the diesel well is? Because they will.
The diesel unit, the generator, has a cabinet that lifts open, and that's where the control switches are, and that's where the fuel tank is. And that closes back down, and it will be locked. It has a facility for a lock. It'll be locked, and again, that's the key that's going to operate it.
Break the lock again, right?
I think you, go ahead.
Before Sandy comes up, one real quick thing. Again, we talk about sharing the inconvenience. It seems some people back there seem to be inconvenienced by some of the questions being asking. And we're talking about an hour or two on a weeknight where they probably want to be home and they consider this an inconvenience to them, whereas they're okay with our inconvenience for 10 weeks every night until 9:40.
So as I mentioned, the microphone will be open to you as long as you need it. You're addressing the board. If people
Okay.
want to stay tonight, they could stay. If they
No,
don't want to stay, they don't
I'm
have
talking
to stay.
about, I'm talking about our, neighborliness,
Okay, do you have a
cooperating.
specific question for
I guess
Peter
I
or the
wanted to
board?
find out from Sandy how the high school teams will make use of these lights.
Thank you. Sandy, could you take a minute? A few people have asked tonight about the benefit to high school students. Could you just go over that? And then we'll see if anybody in the audience has questions for you. Thank you, Peter.
And maybe Sandy too, one of the things that's always been striking to me are the safety concerns that presently exist with all three of those teams practicing simultaneously and how some of that might be alleviated with the use of the lights.
Okay. So the first thing is we can practice until 7 o'clock if the lights are on. And like I said earlier, that would give us about an hour and a half extra time to practice at that facility. I know that now that daylight savings has changed and it's getting lighter earlier, but I do know today with the clouds, by 5:30 it's starting to get dark. When we are playing lacrosse on the track, we need that extra light for safety purposes. We have netting that goes behind the end zone and wraps around the end zone so that we can play soccer and lacrosse while track is practicing. That extra hour and a half or that extra practice time till 7 o'clock will help us as far as leaving the track teams, which is about close to 300 kids, to use the field and the track till about 4 o'clock. And then that will give me 3 hours to schedule boys lacrosse for an hour and a half and then girls lacrosse for an hour and a half. Right now, if I have to stop at 5:30, I have track using the track in the field until 3:30, quarter to 4, and then I only have an hour and a half for lacrosse practice. So that means that they just don't get that quality time on a turf field.
Thank you. Any questions from the board for Sandy? Any questions from the public for Sandy? Just go to the microphone, say your name and address, and ask your question.
Hi, Sandy. How are you? Sandy, my question is simple. Do you know when sunset is tomorrow?
Okay, as part of our discussions last week, and I think in facilities, we were given a list of every sunset for the next 3 months.
Right.
Whether Sandy knows the time of sunset tomorrow or not, I don't think is relevant to the board's decision. Sandy, if you want to answer the question, go ahead. If you don't want to, that's fine.
She doesn't have to answer it. It's a simple question. You stated you'd gain an additional hour and a half of practice time from 5:30 to 7 o'clock, correct? Yes, due to the facilitation of the lights, the addition of additional light, the children can play from 5:30 till 7, correct? The school, this is the school's benefit we're talking about. The school's benefit being that the children will pick up an extra hour and a half playing time from 5:30 to 7 p.m., correct? Sunset today was at 6:59. Sunset tomorrow will be at 6:59. It will get progressively later. The sun will be out at 7 p.m. There will be no need for lights from today for the next 10 weeks at all. There will be no benefit to the school children and the school programs because the sun will be in the sky. You can deploy the lights if you wish, but they will be inconsequential because the sun will still be out. The only benefit of these lights for the next 10 weeks will be to the Westfield Soccer Association, not to the Westfield school system. And sunset is sunset. I can't make that up.
You want to comment on that or no? It's up to you. You don't have to.
You know, I could look at my phone and find out the sunset for any given day, just as you did. But I can tell you this, that at 6 o'clock, there's no way today that they're playing out on that field. Certainly not playing lacrosse at 6 o'clock today in that weather with it being dark out today. It was too dark to play at 6 o'clock. I know what you're saying on your phone, but I'm telling you, at 6 o'clock today, they're not going to be practicing outside. It's too dark.
Please go to the mic, and then let's move on from the sunset issue.
Fantastic. We're arguing it today, 6 o'clock, it was raining. Would you deploy the lights in the rain? Are these lights going to be deployed in the rain? Anyone?
They're suitable. Are they suitable for all weather?
They are all weather lights.
Then my understanding is
Okay.
they will be used. If there are no other questions for Sandy, Greg?
With all due respect, Sandy, I don't think you planned on dealing with this kind of an issue when you took the job as an athletic director. I think she does do a wonderful job as our athletic director. I've worked with Sandy as treasurer of the Friends of Westfield Track. I've had conversations with her before. I'll cut to the chase here. With all due respect to Mr. Franks, Mr. Aronson, and Sandy, have any of you gotten a hold of the land use ordinances and gone over them. Tonight, I didn't ask that question to get an answer. I know the answer. I don't think you have. I handed an envelope tonight with Mr. Kaplow's name on it. It was sealed. This is exactly what's in that envelope. This was what was exactly read by my neighbor Dan. I'm going to give this to the board now. You're all free to look at it. But here are the multiple land use ordinance violations due to the request for lighting on Kaler Field. And there are current violations as we speak without those lights. So please look at this before you decide to vote, whichever way you vote. I'm hoping this doesn't become a legal issue. Thank you.
And so just to remind you, I've already said that I'm modifying the proposal to make sure and confirm that we are in compliance with all the town regulations. And the process we've used is in compliance with the town regulations. That's my understanding. You've raised a valid question. We'll find the answer. Anyone else?
Just the last thing. I guess, no, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh. No, you know what? You go.
Anyone else?
Thank you. Serena Vash, Hamlin. I had a question for Sandy. She's over there, so hopefully she can answer from here. Do we have any information or statistics on how many students we lose to private schools because we don't have sufficient facilities here in Westfield Public Schools? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I remember it now. A couple of times it was asked, what is the purpose of the pilot program? I'll tell you what I believe it is. I believe the purpose of the pilot program, if it's successful, is to say we want to have March, April, and some of May every year going forward until 9:30 having practice. And then we would like to do that in the fall too, so that we can now do 3 months in the fall after it gets dark. Well, maybe it doesn't get dark until October, so maybe a month in that time frame, or maybe 2 months. I don't know. I believe that would be the purpose of having a pilot program. Is that on the? I don't know if that's the WSA's agenda or the Board of Education's agenda. Would that be the result of a successful pilot program?
I haven't seen that on anyone's agenda. Certainly, if it were, it would become before a public meeting.
Peter, would that be the expectation from a successful pilot program?
My proposal was for the 10 weeks this spring to help make catalyst to do something in the future here in the town. Where it happens, who it happens with, how it happens, I'll help to drive it. I'll be a volunteer again.
Okay, and I guess maybe it would be hopeful that it is successful. I guess the last question I would want to ask is, it was mentioned that 10 years ago the program was pretty much where it is today, and I'm not going to say it's less today, let's just say it's the same, but we were at a tipping point back there, and in 10 years nothing got accomplished with respect to doing something with our fields. The WSA has specifically said that they're substandard fields and they're not playable. So my question is, when does the grassroots process start, if it hasn't started already? And when are we going to get together as a town and try to develop these other fields, whether they be Roosevelt Field, the field at Elm Street, and maybe Franklin Field and Washington Field, because it seems like there are many people here, some of them have left already, who would really appreciate that for the benefit of our kids. And I would bet you that there would be 65 homes and 325 people that would be more than happy to support you on that. So if and when that happens, we're with you, and let us know.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions?
My name is Susanna McLean. I live at 8 Stanley Oval on the north side of town, so not near a field. My children are 13 and 15. They are both soccer players for the WSA and have been since they were 4 years old. It is the main thing they do with their lives in any kind of sports way, except for fencing, as you heard earlier today. I think one thing that we are forgetting is that a year or two ago, the Board of Education tried to get the town to approve putting turf on the high school field. That got shot down. It got shot down by voters who refused to pay the taxes that were required to pay for that. And it got shot down by people who lived in the area who didn't want lights and noise in their town, in their houses. So Roosevelt, we would run into the same problem without doing some kind of pilot to alleviate concerns. Elm Street, we would have the same kind of problem. Washington School, we would have the same kind of problem. All of these areas that we're talking about are near homes. And so the whole point of this pilot is to try it in a way that maybe works near homes, where people realize, you know what, it's not a big deal. We can do this. And so then we can take that information and maybe turf another part of the town without the kind of concerns and fears that people are expressing tonight. We are up against a wall. We have 3 teams to a field sometimes. It's crowded. You can't get a good practice in when you can only use a quarter or a third or a half of the field. And it's not just the WSA. The lacrosse team has grown. Field hockey has grown. There are a lot of other sports in this town. And so the demand for this field space has increased dramatically over the last 10 years I've lived here, and it's going to continue to increase. So we need an outlet, and that's why we're doing the pilot, to see if we can make it work so it doesn't upset the people living around the area, whether that's in Keller, whether it's at Roosevelt, whether it's in Elm Street, or someday maybe back at the high school. But we can't just have people saying, no, 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 not in my backyard, with no solution, with no outlet. We can't turf Unami. It's a county park. We can't turf Echo Lake. It's a county park. We're limited. I don't know. That's not in the Board of Education's realm. They can't do that. The Board of Education has absolutely no control over Tamaulipas. So that would have to be a town thing. So would we as taxpayers, be willing to pay to turf Tamaulipas? That would give you the ultimate solution. Maybe that's a solution. And we would love to have your support if that something comes up. But let's give this a try.
I was really hoping not to have to come back up, but I'm sorry. Greg Lemberg, 528 Grove Street. So some of the success criteria for this pilot program are around noise and light and light spillage and that sort of thing. I can give you the results of the noise part of the test already. Those of us who live around the field hear the activities on the field when there are activities, be they practice, games, doesn't matter. It happens during the day. It will happen at night. So tick that box. That part of the test is already complete, and we already know the answer. Whether light spillage can be controlled or not, I have no idea. Why pile on to the residents in this neighborhood who already have the highest use level in their backyard of any field, of any park, of anything else in the whole town of Westfield? So to me, the test has already failed before it started, because we have already living proof of what happens from a noise perspective when that field is used, whether it's daytime or nighttime, it really doesn't matter. So that would be the thought that I would leave behind with the board. Again, the pilot program, I understand it's a temporary thing, the way it's been defined, but some of the criteria we've already evaluated, having lived behind or around Keller for 10 years since it's been turfed, and we've seen the activity levels at the rate that they are. We already know the impact inside of our homes as well as in our yards. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, anyone from the board? All right, I had, during conversation, asked to modify this proposal. Dana, you'll have to tell me how to do that. Can I just make a modification?
You can make a motion to amend.
I would motion to amend the facilities resolution number 1 to include a point that confirmation before any installations of lighting that the proposal is in compliance with all applicable town regulations and the process followed is appropriate under all applicable town regulations, and that is responsive to the concerns raised tonight. Do I have a second? Ginny, thank you. Do any other board members have modifications or alterations to this proposal?
So just a clarification, so maybe say, so that the public is clear. So there was a proposal on the table, you're modifying the proposal. We would be voting on the proposal as you amended it, which basically says that if we were voting for it, it would only pass if we could come back and validate that we have the appropriate permits, and that whatever land ordinance issues have been brought up as questions were resolved favorably. Is that what you're saying?
If there are regulations or processes that we were supposed to follow and we didn't,
Right.
then there is no proposal.
Despite the fact we may have voted for it. We might have voted yes
Well,
for for your proposal as revised.
As I've revised it, the proposal could not be implemented until we've confirmed we've met what we need to do.
Should the issue be tabled until we get those answers?
That's up to the board.
So
So, so because of the snow and we unexpectedly have back-to-back meetings, and we are meeting again next Tuesday. I'm not particularly keen, I mean, my inclination to vote tonight would be because I don't want to rehash 3.5 hours of this next week, but my inclination is that we get the answer and vote next week. And I would hope that, the public would be aware that we are fully conscious of all the comments that were made tonight. If we need to rehear them again, we'll rehear them again. But it seems to me that since we are meeting next week, maybe that's the appropriate way to proceed. So I guess I would move that we table the conversation until we have confirmation that all town ordinances and permits and regulations have been complied with.
Is there a second?
yes, I second that.
All right. Any comments or questions from the board? Roll call?
Rich Matesic?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler? Yes. Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Abstain.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
I'll withdraw my motion, number 1 on facilities, and that will be on the agenda at such time as we can confirm what we've said we'll confirm. The expectation is we have an answer by next Tuesday. You'll have to tell us if that's reasonable. There's nothing else under facilities. Peter, to the WSA, thank you for your time and statements. Sandy, thank you for your time and statements. To the neighbors around Keeler, thank you for your times and statements. And to everybody in the audience, thank you for your time and statements. Very much appreciated. We do have a long agenda, so I'm going to keep going. Policies, Lucy?
This year we built in 4 snow days, and we've only used 2, so we're thinking of planning on giving back 2 of the unused snow days. I'd like the board to consider the following resolution. Whereas the Westfield School District has 2 unused snow days which require a change in the school calendar, therefore be it resolved that if no additional snow...
Hey, excuse me, just to everybody in the audience, just if you could please, I know you want to talk and et cetera, if you could just please move outside, because we do have a long agenda. It's after 11, and we're just trying to keep rolling. Thank you. Go ahead, Lucy.
Do you want me to start that over?
No, we all heard it. Go ahead.
Okay, resolve that if no additional snow or emergency days are used, the Westfield Board of Education approves amending the current calendar, improves closing all schools on Thursday, April 2nd, 2015, and Friday, May 22nd, 2015. Can I have a second?
Second.
Ginny? Dana?
Rich Matesic?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Peggy Oster? Mitch Slater?
Yes.
I just would reiterate, for the sake of everybody, to make sure we heard, that was April 2nd, a Thursday, and May 22nd, a Friday. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Curriculum, anything else, Lucy? Curriculum, instruction, and program, Gretchen?
I would ask the board to approve SIP item number 1. Can I have a second? Ginny, does anybody have any questions, comments? Dana?
Rich Matesic?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brittany Galligan?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Peggy Oster? Mitch Slater?
Yes.
Anything else? No. Finance?
I'd like the board to consider items numbers 4 through 8. Second, Ginny, thanks. Questions or comments? Nobody? Dana?
Rich Matesic?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
Anything else, Mark?
No, sir.
Where are we? Notes for the record?
Yes.
I'd ask the board to note the notes for the record.
So noted.
I would then recognize the public for questions and/or comments on any topic.
Stand up and,
Oh, sure, Nat.
Mike? Come on, Mike, I know you got something. You've been waiting all night, Mike.
I would then note that the board will move into workshop for the budget. We'll move to room 140.
140.
140. So let's do that quickly. Thank you very much.